only did you say you'd go first, but you kept going. And I know that the metrics that we do have point to you are all doing really, really fantastic individual and collective work, and the world is demanding more from us. So I will say, Ms. Baez, it is always a pleasure to join you and Superintendent Huerta and your team in lifting the absolute best of our children and families, and count on me. You know, you could email me or call me directly. I am grateful, I am inspired, and I am confident whatever comes next, we are the ones we've been waiting for in our community to continue to push and dismantle oppression and exclusion and bring in inclusion and strength and resilience and asset-based thinking, because this world needs to change, and you are right in the place that you wanted to be. So gracias, felicidades, adelante.
Thank you very much, Monica. So just to begin, I echo the sentiments of our board members in saying that I do wish you well, I wish you health, I wish you safety and security. I wish you warmth and I wish you peace in these times. You have endured so much these past few months, and of course this entire year, but these past few months were so unexpected. And as I see your faces here, and I imagine your 306 faces out in your homes right now, I am connecting with the people that you are, that I've known, that I've worked with for the past 25 years. And we've all become stronger because of this. I want to share some logisticals for this meeting. We have an agenda. It's in our Schoology. Agendas in our Schoology folder for principals meeting and assistant principals meeting. We also have our PowerPoint for today in our principal and assistant principals group meeting. I know you visit it rarely because we all have our community of schools infrastructure we've been meeting with our principals with, but it still exists. It's still there. Open the folder to June 17th, 2020 to find the materials for today's meeting. You will find that in our meeting, the content of this work will be for us to learn how to tell our story, our leadership story, and leading through that story. And we have 6 principals, one from every community of school, who will be sharing their equity leadership story and how they beat all odds to bring distance learning to our families and our communities. We are always being told and asked to tell a story. So today we're going to learn that structure to be successful in telling that story. So we're going to get to hear from Angie Goodman, and then we're also going to hear from our principals and from our leadership team. We'll also be sharing some video messages that we compile to you on a flip grid. So these next few hours will be filled with lots of learning and fun and reconnecting with one another. Our numbers continue to go up to 309. So I welcome all of you to our principals meeting. At this point, it is the distinct pleasure that I have to welcome our fearless leader, Superintendent Huerta, who has had a vision, who's had the muscle, the strength, and the drive, who's been pushing us every single day, long hours, high accountability, to make sure that we meet outcomes. I cannot describe enough this person that you don't get to see on a daily basis, but believe me, it's because of his strength and his perseverance and his persistence that we meet outcomes, that we're at 90% graduation, #1 in LA Unified, and #1 in connectivity and distance learning. It's done because of the way he pushes us. And through the good times and the bad and the tears and the happiness, Mr. Huerta, it was worth it. It was worth it. So with that said, I'm gonna project the PowerPoint and then I'm gonna hand it off to our fearless leader, Superintendent Huerta.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you could all hear me. Thank you so much. You know, today is a celebration of your leadership. You guys have been amazing. Thank you, Francis, for that introduction. And I want to thank the board members for joining us today to celebrate your leadership and to celebrate this year. Because we know that education was taken to a different level. There was a new challenge this year. Who would have thought mid-year our educational strategies and all the planning that we had was going to be interrupted so fast, so abruptly. And yet you were able to adjust and you were able to take the kids to where they had to be. I know there were a lot of challenges, And that's a tribute to your leadership. I know that not all teachers were on board, but you found a way to have our students connect, because we know we can't do anything unless our students have that connectivity. And like Francis said, we are number one in all of LA Unified with that. And so, and graduation rate. And I have to tell you, I think we missed a great opportunity to show the world. Had we completed this year, folks, I think you're all on board, with all of the instructional focus that you all had and the standards that you were all working on, ensuring that all your teachers were on board and teaching our students what had to be taught and preparing them for the SBAC. I think we lost the opportunity to show the world those SBAC results. And I think you all understand that. We were gonna be, it would have been another amazing data piece to share out with everyone, because we were on the right track. But you know what? We're gonna be able to do that at some point again and show everyone. But no matter what it is that what challenge we may have, I know that our focus in Local District East is just about student achievement and taking care of each other and making sure we're in the right place with all the supports needed for that to take place. And you've always raised the bar, and you've always been there for everyone. So I want to thank you for that. And our data shows that it's working. And you know, I've always said that the toughest part of my job is to find the best leaders out there to work in our local district. And you're a testament to that. So I want to thank you for all of that. And, you know, we had a major device distribution system going. And I know that was at a time when we were not sure if it was safe to do so. So I want to thank all of you for answering that call and ensuring that all the protocols were in place for you to do that. I know that was a big lift, and yet our kids were able to receive a device. Folks that are setting policy or making rules, they didn't see what you were going through in the trenches at your school sites, ensuring that there was social distancing, ensuring that you connected with all the parents, setting up appointments for them to pick up the devices, ensuring that everything was clean and safe. There was a lot of work. I got to see it in a few places, and I got to tell you, you were amazing. And then, but before that, we had the grab and go food distribution. And that was a big lift, because in the beginning, if you recall, some of your staff members and some of you were asked to be part of that. And then little by little, it phased out. And then we had the amazing folks from Beyond the Bell to take over that. So once again, I want to thank you for that. That was huge. We know that our community needs to have nourishment. We know that our kids need that and depend on us for that. And you were there to answer that call as well. And then now, in recent days, we had the grad and go, the graduation and go, and some are still going on. I know there's some of those events coming up on Saturday, but that was also another way to connect with our communities and for you to show your leadership and somehow set that up so that our kids can have some kind of a culmination for the year. I feel bad for our seniors in high school, for our fifth graders, because, you know, they're used to celebrating. They've seen their siblings celebrate. They've looked forward to these days. And we tried our best, and you've tried your best to make it as memorable as possible. I've seen some of the things you put together. I've been part of some of the graduation ceremonies. And I have to tell you that my hat goes off to all of you for trying to provide and for providing a good place for our students. So thank you. I am humbled. I've always said that I am very humbled to be able to work with all of you, because you are making a difference. Many folks say our kids can't succeed. We've heard it. Many of us have lived it. Many of us lived that, where folks didn't believe we can do it. But you are a living example of what it takes to make believers, not only of everyone out there that our kids can do it, but of our kids themselves. You know, just to share a little piece, we started a Fender class. Fender is collaborating with us, and we started a music program. It started yesterday. We have about 1,000 students. Many of those students are here from Local District East. And I have to say, Mr. Buettner is a visionary, and he thought of having this opportunity. He asked East to lead it, and we opened it up with the help of Francis Baez and many others. And it's taken off. And these kids started playing guitars yesterday. Can you imagine? Fender sent them a brand new guitar for them to keep. And these kids, instead of just hanging out in the summer, they're going to be learning how to play an instrument. And that's just an example. And that's just the starting point. We're going to expand that in the fall to maybe 2,000 more students. So just wanted to share some ideas of what we are doing to try to connect our kids. We walk the talk. And you do it all. So thank you for that. And, you know, it's always encouragement for the future is to stay focused on student learning. I don't have to say that to you because you know that's what it is. But we can't do it unless we take care of each other. And thank you, please. You know that the reopening of the school year, we don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but I know we'll be in a good place because believe me, we're going to strategize. We're going to make sure that everything's taken care of before we could even do that. So I look forward to seeing many of you in the fall at your school sites if that's where we're going to go. And if not, we'll continue with our Zooms. You know, we just have to make sure that everyone's safe. On the last piece, and I know that you're all going to share stories today. They selected, I believe, 6 principals to share their stories. But I have to tell you, every single one of you, I see 322 on the call. I know that 322 of you have a story to share of how education made a big difference in your life, how one teacher took you under their wing or believed in you when others didn't, and you were able to latch on to that and to that motivation and succeed, or one parent or a situation in your life. So we were only able to get 6 because of the time, but I'm sure that all of you could share a story at some point or another, and I know you do in front of your faculties and others. So kudos to you, principals. I salute you. I thank you. I know assistant principals are here. Folks, learn everything you can, assistant principals, from your principals, because they are there for a reason. They are there because they've proven themselves, and latch on to as many things as you can from them, because you're not, what they can offer you, you cannot learn from a book. You'll never find that in theory. You will see it in practice, and they are great mentors. So please learn all you can. Also, I know that our operation coordinators are on board. Thank you all for that, and our directors and our instructional coaches. I want to thank everyone on this call. So on the last piece, I just want to make a couple of announcements. I want to introduce new members to our team. And I know we're going to lose some members as well. They're going to go on to bigger and better things. I don't know, Francis, if you have that on the agenda later on, or I can mention a couple. You do have that on the agenda?
I have a retirement at the end, but you definitely can announce other transitions as well.
Okay, so we have a great leader, an amazing support in the Southgate and Huntington Park and Bao-Cudahy area, currently working in the Bao-Cudahy COS. Dr. Jauregui, Guillermina Jauregui, was promoted to a COS in Local District West. So we're gonna miss her tremendously. So you recall she worked at International, and then she became our director, and then our A3G director. And so the Local District West, I don't think they realize how fortunate they are to have her there. And I know that Joyce Dara, an amazing leader, was at El Sereno with us, and then went on into International Studies and Academy, and she will be also a COS in Local District West. So Local District West knows where to find talent, I'll tell you that much. So they're going on and moving on to better things. But here I have to announce that we late in the game, we opened a COS, we found some monies, we were able to also look for a COS, and we flew the position for Boyle Heights, and there were a few applicants, and we selected Daniel Gettinger. Daniel Gettinger, the principal at Maywood Academy, will be the COS at Boyle Heights. So please congratulate him. I know he's gonna later on send some messages to all of you. But as you recall, he started off, as far as I remember, I know he was at other places before, at Huntington Park High School. Then he became a very successful principal at Hilda Solis, being a lot of changes there, and then went on to be very successful at Maywood Academy. And so he will now be our COS at Boyle Heights. And folks in Boyle Heights, I have to tell you, maybe many of you don't know him, but once you get to see what this gentleman is all about, you will respect and understand and be so happy to work with him. He's amazing. We also have a new operations coordinator. We never had an operations coordinator at Boyle Heights, so we opened the position, and we were surprised to learn that Jose Avila, the current principal at Hilda Solis, decided to apply for it. So there were other folks that applied. It was a close call, but experience and everything that Jose brings to the table, and it was a tough decision, regardless of his experience. But we selected Jose Avila to come back as an operations coordinator. And we haven't decided how we're going to shift things around where the ops coordinators are going to be, especially right now with remote learning. And we don't know what that looks like in the future, but we'll find a good spot for them. And I know that we have Luz Baltazar, dual language coordinator. So thank you all for that. And she's going to be an amazing person. And welcome Luz Baltazar to our team. You're going to find that you're going to find a home here, and you're going to see what I'm talking about. You're going to realize that it's true. Our leaders are amazing. So I don't want to take more of your time. I just want to say thank you for everything, and for all the support and taking our kids to the next level, because that is what it's all about. We know that the only way to lift kids out of poverty is through a good education, and that's what we're doing here in Local District East. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huerta. And I welcome all of our new team members. Luz Baltazar has been successful in beginning dual language programs. She's going to be instrumental in creating pathways, elementary, middle, and high school, which is a dream of all of ours. I'm very happy to see that Daniel will be with Boyle Heights full-time, and Jose Avila. I want to thank Maricela Sanchez, who has been the dedicated full-time person at Boyle Heights. I am happy to return to my full-time assignment as an administrator of instruction and support everyone in a more focused approach. I've been doing 2 jobs happily. I'm tired. I'm glad to be back as full-time AI. And so with that said, I'm going to move us on to grounding the work that we do and our why. So this theory of change is a theory of change that has meant so much to us now more than ever before, because it reaffirms what we do every single day. This theory of change began a year ago when we decided to, Mr. Huerta's vision was to have us all closer to our school communities. And so with that said, it was grounded on the vision that Local District East prioritizes equity in all schools and builds on community assets and converting systemic microaggressions into microaffirmations. And our goal that for everything that we see in the classroom, that might be a subtle way that we are perpetuating the behaviors that we're repeating behaviors that we experienced in the classroom that were microaggressions, we have to interrupt those behaviors and convert them into microaffirmations. And so that will lead to students achieving college and career readiness and becoming agents of social change. The social change aspect, who would have known back last year when we were publishing our theory of change that it would mean so much today? And so with that said, that is our grounding, the philosophy, our value, our why. This is a microaggression defined because a year ago, people did not understand what a microaggression was. But with recent events and people talking more about systemic racism, they're understanding what microaggressions are more. This is work that it's grounded and has been followed by many, many researchers. And so Daniel Solorzano is one of them. So we've learned more and more. We learned about it from Dr. Watson, from the Howard Group, when we understood the impact of racism and the impact of microaggressions and the health and trauma that it affects. And these are the subtle, unintentional things that we do and say in schools that we don't even know are harmful. And so we want to convert them into microaffirmations. Our goal is that everything we do and say is about ensuring that our students get the very best. And the microaffirmations are their subtle verbal messages and cues that we send out. Every behavior that we demonstrate shows that we care. And today, when you hear from the 6 principals, you're going to hear that they did this very thing, is they converted microaggressions into microaffirmations. And this theory of change and theory of action were my driving force for everything I had to do, everything our COSs had to do. Every time Mr. Huerta gave us a call or a text and asked and demanded more from us for our kids, this was the theory of change that made me say, yes, Mr. Huerta, right away, let's get it done. So with that said, there is a message, since we can't have all of the COSs and all of the team and all of LD East present, we do have a flip grid that we have put together. We want you to be able to visit it. You're going to be able to see messages to you. And we're going to now, I'm going to stop sharing so Ricardo shares the screen and takes us to 6 videos and to the flip grid where you're going to see all of Local District East recording a message to you. And you can see it on the link in the PowerPoint. When you click the link, at this point now, Ricardo's going to walk us through a few of the videos and messages to you. Can you get the sound?
And I have a special message from me to you. Hello, everyone. I'm Guillermina Jauregui, and I have a couple quotes from Dr. Seuss. Unless someone like you cares a whole lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. But step with care and with great tact. And remember that life is a great balancing act. And I have a special message from me to you. You're a very special principal, and you should know how I love to work with you in VCM. How fast this year did go. Remember to connect with me as through the years will go. Try hard to go from good to great. There's so much to do and know. One thing I want to share with you to last that whole life through, it is that you are special just because you are you. Thank you and have a great day.
Hello, LD East principals and other administrators. My name is Jesus Nunez, and I'm the Community Schools Administrator for the schools in Southgate. I want to congratulate you and commend you for an outstanding academic year. Well, it's been very difficult. We went from a brick and mortar setting to a virtual one. You demonstrated incredible leadership and flexibility as we navigated these uncharted waters. And I'd like to share a quote with you right now because the sense of team always brings me comfort and solace. So here goes. We are not a team because we work together. We are a team because we respect, trust, and care for each other. Bala Afshar. So I know at times the principalship can seem like a very, very lonely position. Just know that you have an incredible team around you, not only at your school sites, but at LD East. We want you to take comfort in that. We want you to take advantage of that. And we want that to strengthen you and your resolve to really put out the best school possible for our students. So with that said, please remember, rely on your team, and we wish you an outstanding close to your school year, and we wish you even more academic success next year. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lourdes Ramirez Ortiz, the Community School Administrator for East Los Angeles. One of my favorite quotes is by Mary Radmacher. It says, "Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, 'I will try again tomorrow.'" Thank you, school leaders, for your strength and courage this school year, but especially these past 3 months. You are indeed the heartbeat of your communities and the pillar of strength on which they lean. As you look towards the new school year, remember that even the darkest nights will end and the sun will rise. Get some well-deserved rest. We'll see you next school year.
Hi, I'm Renee Amesquita, Early Childhood Education Director. Time is neutral and does not change things. With courage and initiative, leaders change things. By Jesse Jackson. This reminds me of you, early childhood education principals. You have shown your courage and initiative as you've navigated these uncharted waters by continuing to provide developmentally appropriate practices for our youngest learners. You lead with passion and support teachers as they continue to learn new strategies. You know your why. Thank you for being you, for having the courage to do what is best for students. We don't get a break from this year until the next year, but please take time to take care of yourself. Go for a walk, spend time with family, enjoy nature, smell the flowers, do something that makes you happy. Thank you for being a courageous leader. Thank you for all you do, and I look forward to working with you during the next school year. Thank you, and ECED rocks.
Hello, Local District East principals and assistant principals. My name is Frances Baez, Administrator of Instruction in Local District East. The quote that I want to share with you today is from the book, The Future of Education, Learning in the Age of Disruption. Here's the quote. Our future growth relies on competitiveness and innovation, skills and productivity, and these in turn rely on the education of our people. This is by Julia Gillard. This quote resonates with me because it expresses the importance of our role in educating our students and striving to make this world a better place. And that's exactly what you do every single day at your school sites. I want to thank you all for your continuous leadership during the most trying times. For the upcoming year, I wish you health, success, and achievement of all of your goals. Have a great summer.
Good morning. I'm Pedro Avalos, Community School Administrator for Lincoln Heights and Sereno and a tiny piece of City Terrace. I want to share a quote with you that speaks about perseverance, and that is, going on another round when you don't think you can, that's what makes all the difference. Muhammad Ali. You've been battling with a big opponent for rounds now. It's between round 8 and 9. Take a rest, refocus, and when you can't see clear, rely on what you know best. Because once that bell rings again, your perseverance and dedication will lead you to another victory. And that's what you've been doing since the beginning of this unforeseen circumstance. We know that as principals and leaders of your community, you were placed in a situation where you had to answer questions from stakeholders without much direction or answers. But you kept pushing forward to meet the needs of our students. You excelled in the distribution of devices, you overachieved in the completion of virtual IEPs, and most importantly, you connected with students, teachers, and families to continue with teaching and learning. You're awesome. Hang in there, just a few more rounds. Get ready for another victory. Enjoy your break, it's well deserved.
Good morning, leaders of the Local District East. My name is Ruben Weiss, and I'm the Bell Cudahy Maywood Community of Schools leader. And I just want to thank you for having a great year. And as you may know, the quote that I want to share with you today is, don't worry, be happy. And you may ask, Ruben, why are you sharing that quote? The reason I'm sharing that quote is because there are so many things that happen in this world that we have no control over. And I think if we focus on the things that we do have control over, and we worry about solving those problems, then we will eventually be happy. There are so many things, like I said, that we do not have control over, such as last year's strike, this year COVID-19 and the safer at home. And I think we as teachers, students, staff, and especially leaders, to be the best they can be. And all of you rose to the occasion. So I am proud to be a leader of the fabulous local District East, but more importantly, of the excellent leadership that we have in the Maywood Community Schools. So again, don't worry, be happy, and have a great summer.
Hello, good day, everyone. My name is Gerardo Loera. I'm the Community of School Administrator for the Huntington Park, Walnut Park, and Vernon Community of Schools. The principal goal of education in the schools should be creating men and women who are capable of doing new things, not simply repeating what other generations have done. In LA Unified School District, many would argue that it's a system that does not like to change and try new things. Given what's happened this last year, few of us could have imagined where we are today. And I believe quotes like this force us to rethink about how we serve our kids and find opportunity under really uncertain and unforeseen times. To all of our principals and administrators and teachers out there, I want to offer a heartfelt thank you and appreciation for all of the new work that resulted out of this pandemic and all of the dedication and countless hours spent in figuring out how to do new things and prepare our kids to be able to accomplish new things in new ways. As we head into the future, the times still remain uncertain, but what I do know is that your work and dedication will continue to be relentless in the future as we continue to reinvent ourselves, to learn, and to be able to inspire our kids and prepare them for their futures. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the collection of videos and messages. There's many more there for you to visit. And so you can hear from all of us, since we haven't seen each other in a long time. To all 330 of you out there, now I am very happy to move us on to the content and the meat and potatoes of our agenda for today. I want to introduce Andy Goodman. I want to read his bio first, and then we'll hand it off to you. Hello. So Andy Goodman is a co-founder and director of the Goodman Center, which teaches communications and marketing professionals how to reach more people with more impact. Along with storytelling as best practice, he is author of Why Bad Ads Happen to Good Causes and Why Bad Presentations Happen to Good Causes. He also publishes a monthly journal, Free Range Thinking, to share best practices in the field of public interest communications. Andy is internationally known for his speeches and workshops on storytelling and has led over 500 trainings for clients, including CARE, the Nature Conservancy, Boys and Girls Clubs of America, NOAA, the San Diego Zoo, MIT, Princeton, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, GE, Bank of America, and many others. He has designed communications curriculum for the College for Social Innovation in Boston, as well as for the African Leadership University in Mauritius. When not teaching, traveling, or recovering from teaching and traveling, Andy serves on the advisory board of the Institute for Human Caring. And with that said, now I want to introduce Andy Goodman. Big round of applause.
Thank you, Francis. Let me share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. There, can you all see that okay? Well, welcome, and thank you for making this time to talk about leading through storytelling and telling your equity story. We really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm not here by myself today. Everything we do at the Goodman Center, we do as a team. With me is my Associate Director, Celia Hoffman. I am in the Larchmont Village area. She is in the Mount Washington area. Good morning, Celia.
Good morning, Andy and everyone.
And I did want you to know that we are both Angelinos, so we care a lot about LAUSD, and we're very happy to help you and support you today. Francis just gave you some parts of my bio there, but she left out what may be the most important part, which is how I learned about storytelling. So let me share that with you now. I am a proud graduate of the Walt Disney Jim Henson School of Storytelling. And if you're thinking to yourself, gosh, I didn't know there was a Walt Disney Jim Henson School of Storytelling, There isn't. I just made that up. I think that picture is from Duke University, actually. But I'm not lying to you, because what I really mean to say is that back in the early 1990s, on the ABC television network on Friday nights, there was a television show that was a Walt Disney, Jim Henson co-production. And I was a writer on that show for 3 seasons. And so I can tell you from firsthand experience that if you want to learn a thing or two about storytelling, you could do worse than to work for the Walt Disney and Jim Henson people. That was like, sort of 3 years of grad school for me. And if you're wondering, well, what show was that? Maybe I saw it. Well, this was 20 years ago, but it was on Friday nights on ABC. And this being a group of highly intelligent, caring adults, I'm not sure if you ever saw it, but just for the record, the show called Dinosaurs. Anybody remember this show? Tell you, funny thing about this show, as I said, I was one of 8 writers on the show. And we, the writers, thought we were writing this very witty social satire, using dinosaurs to make fun of human foibles. But 20 years later, when I meet people who remember the show, it seems that the only thing they remember, the only thing, is this.
Wanna give daddy a kiss?
Not the mama, not the mama, not the mama, not the mama, not the mama.
That is starting to bother me.
See, like I said, witty social satire. Anyway, I worked on that show for 3 seasons, learned an awful lot about storytelling. And then back in 1998, I started to put it to work for people like you, people at nonprofits, foundations, schools, universities, educational and cultural institutions of all sorts. And we've been doing it for 22 years. And we've been able to do literally hundreds of workshops for lots of great organizations in the nonprofit community like these, foundations and government agencies like those, colleges and universities, and we work with some corporate clients as well. And we're also really fortunate to work all over the world. We work with CARE in Guatemala. Up in the upper left-hand corner, that's the First Nations tribes in British Columbia who were fighting an oil pipeline that would have ruined some pristine areas. Lower right there, ALU, that's the African Leadership University in Mauritius. And this experience has taught us that no matter where you go in the world, people tend to tell stories the same way. There are some universal laws about storytelling. So what we want to do with you today is this. First, I want to answer the question, why is storytelling so powerful? I believe it's the single most powerful communications tool you have available to you, bar none. And I want to make that case to you today, that if you're not using storytelling, you're not using your most powerful tool. So I wish I could show you all the research we've seen over the years. It's compelling. We don't have that much time. So I'm just going to show you one research study and one campaign that I think say the 2 most important things about storytelling. And hopefully after seeing that, maybe you'll lean forward and say, all right, maybe more here than I thought. So that'll bring us to part 2, which is, how do you tell a good story? What are the structure and the qualities that allow you to tell a story that's memorable and persuasive, that actually changes the way people think and behave? And lastly, we'll talk about the kinds of stories you should tell. We've identified, I think it's 5 categories, and you're going to hear from 6 of your colleagues who are going to tell stories in those categories. So you're going to hear some wonderful equity stories. So that's what we're going to do. Now, if you're wondering, will I get a chance to ask a question or chime in? The answer is yes. After each of these 3 sections, we're going to stop, and I'm going to ask for any questions or comments. If anything I said was confusing, you want to push back, or you just want to make a comment, please put it in the Q&A box. And my associate director, Celia Hoffman, is watching the Q&A box, and I'm going to stop at the end of each of these and call on Celia, and she will relay your questions to me. I believe the way we're set up, you're not able to speak out loud, but if you put a question there, Celia is going to relay it to me. So feel free to chime in through her, okay? So that's what we're going to do. So let's start with, why is storytelling so powerful? And here's the first argument. Stories help us remember. And just stop and think about this for a second. If somebody tells you something and it goes in one ear and out the other, game over. That piece of information has no chance to affect how you think and behave again, right? It's gone. But if somebody tells you something in a way that it actually sticks here, then it has a chance to affect how you think and behave. And stories have that quality. And there was a study done by the University of Minnesota with 5-year-olds that illustrates this beautifully. So I want to tell you about that real quick. So here's what they did. They sent researchers, like the lady you see in this illustration, out to preschool or kindergarten classes, wherever, wherever the 5-year-olds are. And they would go into the class and they'd say, all right, kids, we want to play a really fun game with you today. All right. And here's how the game works. I'm going to hold up cards, like you see in the illustration here, with 2 sides, 2 panels. And there's going to be pictures of 2 things, like a bar of soap and a shoe. And I want you to remember that pair, okay? So your first pair is soap and shoe. Can you remember that, kids? And all the 5-year-olds are like, uh-huh. And then she says, all right, now I'm going to hold up a second card, another pair. This one has, let's say, a baseball bat and a bucket of paint. So I want you to remember that too. Soap and shoe, bat and paint. Very good, kids. And she holds up a third card. This one has, let's say, a cloud and a daisy. She says, I want you to remember this too, okay? And the kids are like, uh-huh. And she holds up for the kids 21 cards. 21 pairs for the 5-year-olds to remember. And when she's all done, she says, all right, kids, I know that was an awful lot to take in, so let's take a break, go out in the playground and play for an hour, and then come back, all right? So the kids go out in the playground, they play, after seeing the 21 pairs, they go out in the playground, play for 60 minutes, come back, they gather around again, and now the researcher says, all right, kids, here comes the really fun part of the game. I'm going to hold up the cards again with the 2 pictures, remember? But this time, one of the pictures is going to be missing, and you have to tell me what's missing. So you get the scenario? 1 hour later, 21 pairs. How many do you think the kids can put back together? If you want to take a guess in the Q&A box, go ahead and do that. What do you think it was? 0, 1, 5, 12? What do you think? Well, there are 5, right? So if you guessed 1, you're right on target. It was 1 out of 21 pairs. That's all they could remember. All right? We're just getting started. Our researcher now goes to another school in another area, a fresh new group of 5-year-olds. And she's going to play the game again, but this time there's a twist. This time, as she holds up the pairs, she calls on a kid in the class, each kid in the class, and says, all right, soap and shoe. Little Maritza, I'd like you to put soap and shoe in a sentence, okay? And 5-year-old Maritza sits there and thinks for a second and says, the soap is in my shoe. Very good. The kids hear 21 sentences connecting the pairs, go out and play for an hour, bring them back and test them. Compared to the first group that could only put back together 1 pair. How do you think the second group did? Same, better, worse? If you want to put a number in the Q&A box, go ahead and take a guess. I'll give you a second. 8 out of 21 pairs remembered. So we're doing better now, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure you got that. All right, 1 more school, 1 more day, 1 more fresh group of 5-year-olds, but this time they say, when you see the pair, I'm going to call on one of you to put the words in a sentence that asks a question. She looks around the room and she says, okay, 5-year-old Mauro, would you please put the word soap and shoe in a sentence that asks a question? And Mauro thinks to himself for a second and says, who put the soap in my shoe? Very good. The kids hear 21 questions, go out and play for an hour, bring them back and test them. Compared to the first 2 groups that only got 1 and 8, how do you think this group did? Same, better, worse, in between? 16 out of 21 pairs remembered. Now, look at these results side by side by side. And you tell me, what did the researchers conclude was happening in these kids' brains by virtue of hearing questions? It was happening not so much when they heard a sentence, and almost not at all when they just saw the pairs. What do you think was happening in their brains? Well, think about it. What happens when you hear a question? Even if it's not asked directly to you, you tend to answer it, right? This is human nature. This is, by the way, why so much advertising asks questions. Have you ever noticed that? You know, you're driving down the 405 and you pass a billboard. It says, wouldn't you like to be on a beach right now? And you're like, yes, I would, right? So you tend to answer the question. So when the kids hear a question like, who put the soap in my shoe? They think, well, you know, it was little Elsa while I wasn't looking there. She's that little trickster. And they start to construct in their minds the rudiments of a story, where somebody is doing something to somebody else and there's an outcome. So triggered by questions, there's a higher level of engagement. The kids' minds start to percolate, constructing stories. That's what was happening out in that playground for an hour. When they brought him back and they held up a picture and just had the soap, little Elsa sat there and thought to herself, soap. Oh, that's right. I put the soap in the shoe. Shoe! And she had the other half of the pair. And they did it 16 out of 21 times. So the takeaway from this study, and as confirmed by many others, if you have some facts that you want people to remember, it is much more likely they'll remember those facts if they're contained within a story than if you just give them the facts. Stories help us remember. That's number one. Second, stories can change our minds, change how we think and behave. And take a moment and think about this. Here's your brain, okay? My brain, all our brains. You see that little dot in the middle there with those boxes inside it? Well, if we were to zoom in, you'd see that in your brain are literally thousands of stories about the way the world works. Thousands of stories. And whenever you confront a new situation, you meet a new person, go into a new place, encounter a new situation, your brain very quickly dials up the closest story it can find to say, do I know how to deal with this? Does this look familiar? And if it does, full speed ahead. And if it doesn't, then your guard is up. Put another way, stories are like the software of your brain, telling you what to let in and maybe what to hold out. So if you want to change how people think and behave, sometimes, many times, it comes down to changing the software up here, changing the stories that they go to that tell them whether to proceed or full stop. And let me show you a campaign that was built on this principle and capitalized on it to change how people think and behave in an important way. The campaign was around the issue of organ donation. Now, in the US, you have a chance on your DMV registrations to check that box to say, I will be an organ donor, right? Well, about 56% will, but about 44% won't. They'll say, no, no, thank you. The 44% who won't, they're not necessarily bad people or selfish people. Some of them have medical excuses and can't. But a lot of them have stories in their heads that tell them that organ donation is not right for them. What do you think are the stories against organ donation? If you want to make a guess, go ahead and put that in the Q&A box. What do you think are some of the reasons people give for why they don't want to donate their organs? Don't hesitate to guess, because you're going to be right. You know these things. What are the stories against organ donation? Well, let me show you the top 4. Doctors won't work as hard to save me. Have you ever heard that? It's like, if I'm in an accident and the ambulance comes to get me and they figure I'm an organ donor, they'll be like, take the long way. We need the kidneys. It's against my religious beliefs. People think, when I go to see St. Peter at the gates of heaven, I can't have donated my eyes, otherwise how am I going to see him, right? I need to be all there. The world's largest religions all endorse organ donation. I'm too old. You can be as old as 80 in most cases. And my personal favorite, rich and famous people will jump the line that if I donate my organs, they won't go to the next most deserving person, that, a Kardashian will take my liver, that type of thing. Now, none of these are true. None of these are true, but people believe this stuff. And so it leads to this problem. Look at these stats from Donate Life America. Right now in the US, about 120,000 people are waiting for an organ. The need so far exceeds the supply, but look at that number in the middle. 22 people die every day waiting for an organ that's never coming. It's 22 tragedies a day. So we need more people to donate their organs. We just do. But the data is not going to do it. If you go to these people who say no and you present these numbers to them, you know what they say? They say, gosh, that's a shame. I'm so sorry to hear it, but I'm sticking with my story. Doctors won't work as hard to save me, religious beliefs, too old, Kardashian, whatever. So how do we change their minds? How do we get them to become donors? Well, you probably guessed the answer. We have to give them a more powerful, more resonant story that changes the software in their brains and changes the way they think and behave. And this was done, and done brilliantly in a campaign in Brazil, in the town there in the red box, pronounced in Portuguese, Recife. Now, if you've ever been to Recife, or Brazil, or South America, or you've never been, I'll bet you know that in Recife, in Brazil, in South America, everyone there loves, adores, is crazy for the same thing. What is it? What do you think it is? Take a guess. Yeah, you probably got it right. It's football, or what we call soccer, what the world calls football. And in Recife, the local team is called Sport Club do Recife. That lion with the 3 stars, that's their logo. That's everywhere in town. That's like going around LA and, you know, and seeing the LA for the Dodgers, right? It's everywhere. People love this team. People would die for this team. Hold on. There's a thought. If they would die for the team, would they donate their organs for the team? Well, believe it or not, that was the genesis of a campaign where they went directly to the fans of the team. And they said, if you truly love this team, go all the way and become an organ donor on behalf of the team. They said, we'll give you this beautiful organ donor card, emblazoned with the logo of the team. But here's the story that they spun. They said, if you're a fan of this team, you truly love the team, and you sign up for this card, and God forbid something should happen to you, but your organs are donated to someone else, your fandom will live on forever. You will become an immortal fan. That was the name of the campaign, Immortal Fans. And this campaign was wildly successful. And I want to show you a short video that chronicles the success of this campaign. And I want you to keep in mind something as you watch it. A few years ago in Pittsburgh, there was a similar campaign that tried to leverage the fans' love of the local teams to get more people to donate organs. It was called Play It Forward. And they got people from the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Pirates and the Penguins to go on TV and say, I'm donating, you should too. And over the course of a year, they got something like 1,200 to 1,400 people who had never signed up for organ donor cards before to sign up. So they were very proud of that effort, 1,200, 1,400 people. Keep that number in mind as you watch this. Take a look.
Amaro, não tem comparação torcida, não tem. O resto é resto, o esporte é tudo. Primeiro Deus, segundo esporte, terceiro a família e quarto é trabalho.
Que os seus olhos vão continuar assistindo o esporte.
Que os seus pulmões continuarão respirando pelo esporte.
Prometo que o seu coração sempre baterá pelo esporte.
Hoje a maior dificuldade que existe no processo de doação é o sim da família.
Eu sou rubro-negra até depois de morrer, irmão. Tem a alma é rubro-negra.
Ainda mais que quando eu doar meus órgãos, meu pulmão for pro cara do Náutico, torcedor do Náutico, ele vai respirar o esporte.
A campanha atingiu números impressionantes. 51 mil torcedores se declararam doadores, uma quantidade superior à capacidade da Ilha do Retiro.
A campanha do esporte, eu não tenho dúvida alguma que serviu para que, aumentando a oferta de doadores, a gente conseguisse zerar essa lista, conseguisse realizar realmente o transplante em todos que estavam precisando.
Uma campanha de doação de órgãos lançada pelo esporte está ajudando a salvar a vida de muitos torcedores.
Antes do vídeo eu tinha passado 18 anos de diabético e 5 anos fazendo hemodiálise. E a vida só está melhorando, minha visão está voltando aos pouquinhos. Eu renasci de novo.
mim, disse, olha, a gente tem um provável coração para sua mãe. Você pode trazer ela? Eu disse, com certeza. Fiquei aliviado de saber que eu ainda iria poder ter ela.
Vamos continuar fazendo o esporte e vamos aí, torcidas do esporte, vamos doar. Vamos tomar essa corrente, né? Não vamos parar.
There you go. Isn't that amazing? 51,000 people signed up for cards right away. The number's well north of 60,000. Even better, sport clubs from Paris and Barcelona called them up and said, how do we do that here? So this very clever idea, radiating around the globe. But look, I'm not here today to talk to you about soccer or football or organ donations. I'm talking about how people's minds work and the importance of storytelling. And the point that I think that this video conveys, and that is also in this book, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, a book which I highly recommend, is this. No one ever made a decision because of a number. They need a story. And please read that closely, because what Kahneman is not saying, and what I'm not saying is, I'm not saying that you don't need the numbers, that you don't need the data. You do. It's important. But if you want to change the way people think and behave, it often starts with a story that gets them to nod their heads and go, yes, that is the way the world works. That does make sense to me. And then is backed by data that says, and I've got more than one story to share with you. And if you still have any doubts about the power of a story to change the world, then I can't offer you any more proof, any better proof than what we've all been living through in the past few weeks and months. Stories change the world. So I want to stop there as promised and take any questions and comments, anything in the Q&A box about the power of story. I'm here to tell you that it is your most powerful communications tool. If you have any doubts or questions, now's the time. Celia, anything in the Q&A box about the power of storytelling?
Nothing so far.
Fair enough. Well, if anything pops up, we'll be stopping again, so Celia will keep an eye. So if a question occurs to you, don't hesitate to put it in there. But let's move on then to section 2, and let's talk about how do you tell a good story? How do you tell a memorable and persuasive story? And I think the best way to learn is always through example. Let's watch some good storytelling. And there was a campaign a few years ago, some of you may be familiar with it. It's called Too Small to Fail, and it was about the Neighborhood Academic Initiative. And in this short video, which just runs a couple of minutes, they're going to tell a story that I think touches all the bases, answers all the questions in the right way. I think this is good storytelling. So let's sit back, let's take a look at this, and on the other side, we'll deconstruct exactly what they did well. Here's Too Small to Fail.
When I grow up, I want to be an aerospace engineer or a pediatric neurosurgeon. Math being my passion, it's fun for me. So whenever I finish a big problem, I get really excited. Is that nerdy?
Family income makes a difference to people's educational opportunities. The best performers from the low-income families go to college at a lower rate than even the lower performers from the high-income families. We have an entire generation of kids not even making it out of high school. Some of them aren't even making it out of middle school.
Our kids have too many obstacles in the way, and sometimes it's their own school. The students may not have enough books. Science teachers don't have science equipment. It's just a lack of resources.
My school has 4,000 students. It's only supposed to hold about 2,000. My peers don't really care about their education. When they go to school, all they see is stressed teachers, yelling, cops. It's just more of a jail. The dropout rate at my school is very discouraging. I don't want myself or my community to be part of that number because we represent much more than that number.
The critical factor that breaks the chain of people generationally staying in poverty is that education, must intervene.
I'm part of a program called NAI, which is Neighborhood Academic Initiative. It prepares us for college. and it gives us all the support we're not getting from school. In the mornings, we go to USC for our first 2 classes, math and English. Then on Saturdays, it's where we get all the college prep.
At NAI, since 1997, 99% of our students have gone on to college. It changes the question for these students from, am I going to college, to which college am I going to?
We made investments 40 or 50 years ago that lifted an entire generation of kids. The problem is, since then, we've stagnated. The rest of the world is not satisfied with where things stand in their own countries. And so what we see in places like China and India and all over the world are countries making enormous investments in the education of their people. If we don't start accelerating, it's only a matter of time that we're going to have our next Sputnik moment.
I've seen my parents have a lot of struggles just because they didn't complete their education. That's one of the things that motivates me. I really want to go to MIT. I want to end that cycle.
The American dream is not something we can take for granted. It's something that we have to nurture and build. Whether or not it is going to be a reality for all people is something that's up to us.
So there you go. So here's why I think this is some good storytelling, because whenever someone tells you a story, whether they're just coming up to you at the water cooler or you're turning on the TV and watching a show or a movie or cracking open a novel, the first question you have in your mind is, who's the story about? Who's somebody I'm going to care about in this story that's going to bring me into the story? The Neighborhood Academic Initiative is an sort of abstract concept, but we can meet and care about 15-year-old Alpha. So this video gives us a character, a person, a real person, to meet and care about. We care about Alpha. And when we meet her, we want to know, what's up with her? What does she want? What does she want out of life? And she tells you right up front, she wants to become an aerospace engineer or a neurosurgeon. So somebody wants something, a story's in motion. What makes stories interesting, though, is what stands in their way. If somebody says, hey, there's this thing I want, I went out and got it, it's mine, good for you, nobody cares. It's just not interesting. What's interesting is when somebody wants something and something stands in their way. That's where we, the audience, lean in and go, oh, well, then what happened? So what stands in her way? Well, first of all, the socioeconomic status, her family's income, which, as you saw Goodman Lou say, can have a strong influence on the trajectory of her life. And also the conditions in the school that she attends are not optimal for her, who has these very high ambitions. So how does she respond to these challenges? Well, she becomes part of the Neighborhood Academic Initiative, NAI. And you saw she has these extra classes and these support resources that are through USC. What happens in the end? What does it mean? Well, actually, to be determined. We don't know what happens to Alpha, but what's good about this story is that it makes us sort of lean forward and say, it looks like programs like NAI are keeping the American dream alive. How can I support them or similar programs? Who's doing this to help kids like Alpha? So this series of questions, this is not random. These 6 questions are the questions your stories must answer if they're going to truly fulfill the audience's expectations when you say, I've got a story for you. So let's go over them one more time. For any story, the first question is, who is it about? Who's the person I'm going to identify with and care about that's going to take me into the story? Your school cannot be a hero of the story, a program, an initiative. People don't identify with entities, with things, with buildings. People identify with people, and they do it on a one-on-one basis. So if you want to tell a story, you got to start with somebody, in this case, Alpha. What do they want? She wants to grow up and be a neurosurgeon or an aerospace engineer. Stories begin when somebody wants something. Stories are not about the status quo. They're not about just what happened today, just everything. It's about somebody wanting something. Now, this might sound like a gross oversimplification, but think about a book you're reading, a novel, TV show you're binging, a movie you've seen recently. I'm willing to bet that the plot, the storyline boils down to who's it about, what do they want? And once you know that as an audience or a reader, then you can sit back and say, okay, I see what's about what they want. Let's see if they get it. Off we go. Now, what happens next is critical. On the way to the goal, there has to be some type of barrier or obstacle, some moment where I want runs into you can't, because that's when the audience leans in and goes, oh, didn't see that coming. So then what'd she do? This creates drama, tension, interest. And I'm not the only one saying it. Let me bring in a higher authority here. You all know Aaron Sorkin, who wrote like The West Wing and The Social Network and the stage play of To Kill a Mockingbird. Look at what he says. That's why we have such good stories to tell now about what you're all going through. You have formidable obstacles. Makes for good stories. Not fun, but certainly good stories. And look, me and Aaron Sorkin, we're not the only ones saying this. Evolution is saying this. Human beings need this in their stories. We have literally evolved to need this in our stories. And I'm going to prove it to you. Bear with me for a second. I want to take you through a short course in human history, okay? Let's jump back in time 70,000 years, okay? It's 70,000 years ago today. It's a Wednesday. You see those two cave persons? You see that bush in the distance behind them, between them? Well, 70,000 years ago, on this very day, they turned around and noticed that the bush was shaking. Now, it's not windy. There's no reason for the bush to be shaking, but it's shaking. The cave person on the left sees the shaking bush and thinks this. The cave person on the right sees the same thing, but thinks this. And unmoved by this unusual event, he goes his merry way, whistling a merry tune, and a saber-toothed tiger leaps out of the shaking bush and eats him alive. Caveman on the left, he survives. His DNA gets passed down. We are his descendants. Caveman on the right, not so much. So the point is, and it's a serious one, human beings, Homo sapiens, evolved to pay very close attention when something happens that we don't expect. And 70,000 years later, when we want to tell stories, capture a slice of life, our stories need a shaking bush moment. Something where the audience says, oh, I didn't see that. That's unusual. You have my full attention. How our hero deals with those barriers will tell us something about them or the school they represent. Are they persistent, passionate? Do they partner? Do they put their head down and bash the wall down? Do they curl up in a ball and give up? What do they do? How do they respond? This reveals character. This tells us more. And how they respond not to just one challenge, but every challenge they face along the way. Good stories will have several twists and turns. That's what we call the rising action of the story. With every new barrier, a little more drama, a little more interest, until they get past the last barrier and maybe they get to the goal. Success, we've just told a success story. We got what we wanted. Or maybe they don't. Maybe something else happened, but whatever happened, there's a clear resolution. And in the end, what does it mean? Why do we tell this story? What's the lesson that we learn? Stories are not just about what happened, they're also about what it means. Let me show you another example. What you're about to see is one of the first iPad commercials. When they first introduced the iPad, we're trying to get us all to understand all the different ways we could use it. They had different commercials showing different uses, and this is one of them. But once again, I want you to look for this pattern of answering the questions: who's it about? What does she want? What stands in her way to make it interesting? What happens in the end? What is it? What's in it? How does she overcome? What happens in the end? And what does it mean? Now, these questions are not asked and answered explicitly, but they're all there. Take a look. Oh, sorry, 1 second, we froze. Hold on. Sorry about that. Hold on. Trying to get my cursor back here. Where is it? Where are you, cursor?
Andy, did you want to troubleshoot that? And I can probably show the audience the discussion board we'll be using.
Yeah, go ahead while I troubleshoot
Yeah?
that. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So let's see what we can do here.
I'll be back in a second.
What I want to also share with all of you is that we will be having a discussion in our discussion board. And now mine is freezing. Okay, here we go. In our discussion board, where after every presenter, we'll be going into our Schoology group and going into discussion to give feedback on the presentations that we're going to see today. So as Andy's pulling that up, I want to show that to you, but I want to prepare the screen before I share it. Here it is. Discussions. And I put it in two places, in the principals meeting folder and in the assistant principals meeting folder.
Okay, Francis, I think I've got it fixed.
You do? Okay.
Let me go back to sharing my screen.
So
Hold on one second. All righty. Can everybody see that okay? Let's go to that iPad commercial, take 2.
I define a miracle as something that comes in and changes your life for the better that you did not expect, that you never thought could happen. When Leo was first diagnosed with autism, it really knocked me sideways emotionally, just to think that things would be difficult for my child. I mean, you never want anything to be difficult for your child. It's hard for Leo to be independent. It's hard for him to self-direct. But with the iPad, it just makes him happy and independent, and he didn't have that ability before. This is something that my son can do, He doesn't need me. I don't want him to have to need me all the time.
Created a device that was going to be indispensable in the things we do every day. And not only do we achieve that, but it's going further, deeper, faster into our lives than we ever imagined. And this is just the beginning.
So there you go. I mean, this is a commercial to sell you an iPad, but they follow the rules. First question, who's it about? Well, it's about the mom, Shannon. And what does Shannon want? She wants her son, Leo, to be independent. What is she up against? What's the barrier? Well, Leo has autism, and he has difficulty working alone. So how does Shannon respond to this problem? How can she face this barrier? Well, she gives him an iPad. And in the end, what happens and what does it mean? Well, Leo can play independently, but the broader message is that iPads can change how anyone works and lives. So again, it's all there. Who's it about? What do they want? What stands in their way to make it interesting? How do they respond? What happens and what does it mean? Those are the questions that we're going to look for your stories to answer. So I want to stop one more time before we get to our last segment, and we're going to take a break shortly. Celia, any questions or comments in the Q&A box about anything we've talked about so far, including what makes a good story and what are the elements of a good story?
Yes, a number of questions. The first that I would like to pose is Ruben asks, how does storytelling relate to BLM?
Well, I think that the George Floyd, every story that we've heard over the last few years, I mean, starting more recently with George Floyd, but going back one after another, Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin and Philando Castile, and every one of those stories has finally added up to what we're experiencing today. We've all seen the statistics about police abuse and the need for reform, et cetera, but nothing is more powerful than those stories. So I think the whole Black Lives Matter movement is built on these stories.
Next question, this is from Philip. Philip says, what kinds of stories attract an audience's attention?
I think stories that answer these questions. When you tell a story, this is what the audience wants to know. They want to know, where's the human being that I'm going to care about? If you start off with statistics or, bullet points or factoids, trust me, your audience is waiting for a human to show up that they're going to say, okay, there's someone I can care about. They'll take me into the story. So it has to do, that's what makes stories interesting. Look, we're human beings. We're all trying to figure out how to navigate this thing called life in ways small and large, right? So every time when I hear a story, it's like, what did that human do? How did they do it? Maybe there's something here for me. No matter what we're talking about, stories are always about people, and we're always trying to figure out how it helps us live our lives.
Next question, this comes from Laura. Laura says, what happens when stories are based on lies?
Well, Laura, that's a good question. The problem with stories is that they are powerful, and that a false story told well can convince people to believe and do the wrong thing. It's all a testament to the power of stories. Human beings love stories and live their lives according to them. And when someone tells a false story, it can really have great influence because we are so susceptible to them. What I think is the winning combination is a story backed by data, because false stories don't have the data behind it. They're false. You can cherry pick false stories here and there. The best example I would give you would be in the whole world of the anti-vaxxer movement. The anti-vaxxers will have a story here or there about some child who got an injection and then got autism, etc. And some of these stories may even be true, but there's no data to support it there are enough random incidents that you could say anything. But the true story is that we need vaccinations to protect individuals and communities, and the data confirms it. There are no studies, there's no research behind any of the anti-vaxxers, but false stories are powerful. So we just have to come at them with bigger and better stories backed by data that will eventually knock out these false stories.
Do we have time for a few more?
Let's take one or two more. I think we're going to take a break at 10 o'clock.
Okay. I have two more questions then. So Natalie says, what if someone's story is far away from your own? We're seeing people get entrenched in their own stories and refute any that do not fit within their framework. Is it possible to change that, and how?
I think what you have to be able to find is some common ground. If a person can find nothing in your story to identify with, there's nothing in that experience that they can connect with, it's not going to change how they think and behave. And let me say, there are some people who you may never be able to change. That what we talk about in politics, when we talk about converting audiences, we talk about the movable middle, which is the people who can be reached. There are people who are inside the tent, metaphorically, who love you and follow you and they're with you, right? And then there are people who are so far outside the tent, they're never coming in. They're not convertible. But the people who are metaphorically peeking inside the tent, wondering, am I interested in this? Do I want to be part of this? That's what we call the movable middle, who can be reached by stories. There are some people, if they're so far outside your experience and just so far gone in their own narratives, they may not be reachable at this time or ever. And you just have to acknowledge that. You're not going to change everybody. But those who are listening, I think the stories are your most powerful tool. One more question, Celia, and then we're going to wrap up the segment.
Last question. Monica seemed to ask a two-part question, but the first part was cut off. So the second part of the question is, how can personal story be used most effectively to encourage team building?
That's a wonderful question. Your personal stories are invaluable. There's a saying in public speaking: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Your personal story about why you do what you do, how you've come to this moment, why you are called to teaching or education, etc., is really the first story you should tell when you're encountering people or trying to lead change, because people want to know, who are you? What are your values? What's your stake in this issue? And once they know who you are and how much you truly care, then they're interested in all the rest. So I'm a big believer in personal stories. I don't think there's anything more powerful than someone getting up and testifying and saying, this happened to me. This is what I believe. So I think in the right situation, given the right amount of time, share those personal stories. And I actually did a workshop with some of the LAUSD, I think it was, I'm not sure if it was the directors, or Francis would know who it was, where we talked about telling your story of self. Francis, do you remember what group that was?
It was the principal supervisors. So the directors in this group were the community of school administrators in this group.
Right. And they got up and told stories about about what education means to them, why this is important. And I got to tell you, there were tears, and that room was glued to those stories because people were speaking from the heart about why they do what they do. So in the right place, in the right time, personal stories are hugely powerful. And with that, because we want to stay on schedule, the last segment we're going to do today, after the break, is what kinds of stories should you tell? And we identified these 5 categories. Stories about how you were deploying devices for remote learning, participating in grab-and-go food distribution, participating in distance learning training, making plans for summer school, or interacting with parents and families to help them cope through this time. These were the 5 categories that we determined, and the 6 principals you're going to hear from after the break are going to tell you stories in these categories. So if my schedule is correct, Frances, I think we're taking, is it a 15-minute break?
Yes, so we're going to take a 20-minute break, and I recommend to our participants and our audience to not log off of the Zoom and just continue to be connected, and we'll take a break for 20 minutes and then come back and then hear from our colleagues and our principals and conclude the meeting after that. Thank you so much. Enjoy your break.
We encourage you, if you've been sitting for a long time, get up, get away from the computer, stretch your legs, get some fresh air, answer the call of nature or your email. But be back with us at 10:20. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. We're at 335 participants. We hope it remains that way after 10:20. Thank you.
Francis, I have 20 past the hour. Are we ready to resume?
Yes, Francis just gave the okay. Please resume.
All right, very good. Well, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good break there. As we said right before the break, oops, sorry, let me skip the right question there. We're going to do some story sharing, but you have a role during the story sharing. Francis is going to introduce the 6 storytellers, and we're going to get out of the screen sharing so you can actually see them tell their stories. We'll go back to speaker view. But as they tell their stories, we want to get some feedback from you. So this is going to be a learning opportunity. Consider these stories first drafts. We're all trying to do better here. So as you listen to the stories, you can put comments in the Q&A box. Tell us, what did you like about this story? What did they do well? Now that you know what makes a good story, what did the storyteller do well? And how could you help them make it even better the next time they tell it? We are at a learning process. We're developing these stories. We want them to get better. So as they tell their stories, use the Q&A box to share your comments. What did you like about the story? How can we make it better? And we'll stop after each storyteller and we'll provide a little feedback. I'll provide some, Celia will provide some, and we'll hear from you as well. Okay, does everybody understand that? Okay, good. So let me get out of screen sharing mode. And Francis, let me turn it back over to you to introduce our storytellers, and then we'll hear from them.
Yes, thank you, Andy. And an additional component that I also want to ask is, in our discussion board, I do want to point your attention to a place where we can capture our thoughts. It says part 1 principal story presentation discussion question. So while we are adding the components about the particular presentation in the Q&A, but for our particular story here, we're going to look at our 6 principles. There's going to be 2 parts, the first 3 and then the second 3. And you've just viewed the first 3 principal presentations, and the discussion indicate instances of the following. And we're going to look at all of those elements that Andy told us about. What was the challenge? What was it about? What do they want? What stands in the way? And how do leaders respond? And what happens in the end? And what does this mean for the future? So that would be for us to look at the presentations and then kind of synthesize it in our minds for any one of the 3 that we saw. Now that will be the discussion, but as we're moving along, the Q&A is just for after every one of our presentations, that's the Q&A. But for us to then deepen our learning about what we saw in the components of creating the story, we're going to look at the discussion. So wanted to share that. That is in the principal and assistant principal discussion board. And in our agenda, we have the sequence and the order. And you'll find that once all of our principals share, you'll find that there's actually, it's almost in chronological order in what we experienced this spring. So at this time, I would like to introduce Maritza Martinez, principal of Brooklyn Span, who's going to share her story.
Thank you, Ms. Baez. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, here we go. Friday, March 13th, 2020, the day that tested me as a new principal. All principals received an email the evening before from our superintendent that schools would close due to COVID-19 and that it was our responsibility to ensure our students had what they needed for distance learning for 2 weeks. All the unknowns hit me pretty quickly. Could I ensure that all of our students have the basic tool, a technology device, to continue learning from home? At the time, I wasn't even sure how many devices we had. I'm new at my school. I didn't know our inventory. I didn't know if it was even doable to assign each student a laptop with that quick of a turnaround. My own memories of not having what I needed to learn growing up made me determined that our kids would leave school that day with what they needed to continue learning at home. I was in the school parking lot at 6 a.m. that rainy Friday the 13th. The logistical nightmare began. I pulled my small team together and we got into every classroom with a scratch paper and pencil in hand to count each working device that we could find on campus. I scheduled an emergency faculty meeting that morning. We gave the kids extra recess in the playground for 15 minutes, while I tasked every teacher to distribute the devices they had, ensure that kids have their logins, and told them to put their planned instruction aside and instead spend the morning teaching kids how to log into the learning platforms they would use at home. We gave each teacher a 5-column roster and said, assign away. But wait, what about parent signatures? What if they don't know their email? All my iPads are old. We don't have enough chargers. What if they don't want it? And endless other questions I didn't have answers to. I didn't know if I was doing things right. I could see it and hear it in the teachers' faces and in all the questions they asked, that we were going into this school closure blind. How do you prepare for a school closure in one day, in one morning? You do what you can. At 9:30 a.m., I get a phone call from the superintendent's office, letting me know that Mr. Buettner would be at our school in 30 minutes to observe device distribution. I can't lie. My first reaction was, great. This is exactly how I wanted our superintendent to observe our school. Running around, disinfecting iPads and looking for chargers. I took a deep breath and said to myself, what he's gonna see is a hardworking team responding to his call. We were doing what we could with what we had. This is what he saw. Chromebooks in clear grab-and-go trash bags to protect them from the rain. A personalized card with student email and sign-in information, QR codes for the little ones, and an unsigned technology device checkout form to go home. Superintendent Buettner walked through classrooms that morning. He observes the devices in trash bags as I cringe, and he gives me the nod of approval. He walks into another classroom and hears a teacher reading the technology contract to third graders, and he turns to me and says, I'm so sorry they have to do this. We walk into another classroom and the students present to him what their work will be for the next 2 weeks. He smiles at them and tells them what a great job they did. He thanks the teacher, and as we walk out, he says to me with a grim look of honesty, you know, this is gonna be more than 2 weeks. Be ready. Be ready. Be ready for what? What do you mean? Ready for uncharted waters. 98% of our students left with a device on Friday, March 13th. At the end of the day, I called another emergency faculty meeting, this time in our auditorium to ensure social distancing. Staff said, are you serious? Is this necessary for us to sit 6 feet apart? Yes, it is. And don't confuse the school closure for a vacation. Truth is, I didn't know what was necessary or what was to come. What I did know is that every kid did get a device, and we responded not with protocol, but with heart. We gave kids what we had while we comforted their fears of the unknown. Friday, March 13th for me will always be an example of the resilience and grit of educators. We many times do the impossible while keeping the hope of what is possible.
Excellent. Good job, Marissa. I'll lead the feedback, and then we'll hear from others. I see the applause there, well-deserved. Marissa, I think you touched all the bases. You know, who's the story about? It's about you, okay? What do you want? Well, you're given, March 13th comes and you're given the task of making sure all these kids have these devices, and on very short notice. A huge task. The barriers along the way, well, you gave a whole list of them. Old iPads, where are the chargers, emails out of date, just all these different hurdles to have to overcome. And then on top of it, the superintendent showing up with, what, 30 minutes notice? Was that what it was? But every barrier surmounted with, you know, with grace and passion and persistence, and also humility, acknowledging that this is not going to be easy. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to do the best that we can. And in the end, what happened? 98% had devices. That's what happened. And what does it mean? that we are there for our kids, that no matter what happens, no matter what is thrown at us, we're going to do the best we can and make sure that their education continues, even with unprecedented hurdles. So, Marissa, if I could give you a grade, I get you an A+ on this one. And now let's hear from others as well. Celia, do you want to add some comments there? Anything I missed? Anything you want to add?
Sure. I mean, Marissa, I thought you did such a good job of keeping us clued into how you were feeling throughout the entire story. You know, one moment that I remember in particular is as you had the superintendent observing you handing out trash bags with devices in them, you cringed. You know, you brought us into your headspace a lot as we were going through this, and that made us emotionally connect to what you were talking about. You were also just really good at including a lot of great visual details for us. Like, we knew it was raining that morning that you got there. And again, like the devices in trash bags, and then a lot of dialogue between you and the superintendent, you know, when he said, you know, it's going to be more than 2 weeks, be ready. So a lot of really helping us to feel like we were right there listening to these conversations that you were having. So excellent job there. One comment we have from Ruben is beautiful story, so powerful, such a powerful demonstration of grit, commitment, and results.
Good. Thank you, Celia, and thank you, Ruben. And Marissa, we're going to have to leave it there because we have 5 other storytellers to get to. But excellent job. Thank you so much for your contribution. Frances, back to you to introduce our next storyteller.
Thank you. And the next story is by Rachel Saldana, principal at Corona Elementary School. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Saldana, and I am the principal of Corona Ave Elementary. Like many schools during COVID-19, we've had our challenges, not to mention the fact that they named one of the worst pandemics the coronavirus. And my school's name is Corona Elementary. The biggest challenge has been taking the lead for our students in distance learning and making sure our students continue to learn. How do I create a virtual campus for my school when students are learning from a computer in their living room and teachers are teaching from their dining room? Distance learning was new to every stakeholder, and my challenge was to get everyone working together productively on our virtual Corona campus. During the first 2 weeks of the school closure, there were so many questions and so many platforms out there for us to use. We had created 840 packets for our 840 students for the first 20 days. We had less than 20 days to ensure all students had access to a device. Like every great story, there was a little luck in our favor. We had just ordered and received our new Chromebooks, which gave us enough to pass out to our students. We passed out our last device on May 31st, 2020. Although many of our students were able to get devices, those that cannot pick them up, I was able to deliver. Those that had devices but no internet connection needed hotspots, which were ordered and given to our families that needed them. All students had connectivity and access to distance learning, but the job wasn't finished. How are we going to manage distance learning for our families that have multiple age children at our school? We needed to make it easy for our parents so they were familiar with one platform, regardless of what grade their child was in. I asked the staff to think of Schoology as our virtual campus, where every morning they would sign in and teach our students. As we started to train our staff, Zoom calling became our program to reach our students and have face-to-face contact. We held our first staff Zoom call, and it was then I realized the computers we had did not have a camera. How am I to lead a school without a camera? How are my teachers going to lead a class without a camera? We didn't need a camera until now, and the fake plastic hole on the screen made us all think we had cameras. Well, if MacGyver can adapt, so can Corona Avenue Elementary. I told them we can use our iPad and our computer together. For those of you that have been on a Zoom call with me, which you're doing now, you may notice I'm not looking directly at you. I'm looking all over the place. Now you know why. I am looking at the iPad and using my laptop to do everything else. I look at it as my DJ system, you know, because I'm so cool. Once the staff was trained, we were ready to now teach our families how to use Schoology. When we returned from spring break, we had a Schoology boot camp. Our teachers and staff held a training for their students and families on how to sign in and use their login and password. Now, as I retell the story, I kind of feel like Mickey and Rocky, training my staff to beat the battle of distance learning. Schoology became a one-stop shop for our families. Before Schoology, we were asking them to log in here, log in there, or use QR or don't use QR. Are you confused by this? I know I was, and it was exhausting. No, I'm not getting money for Schoology, nor am I being paid for making a commercial. I just thought, we have this platform, let's make the best of it. I then received a call from my cousin, Mr. Ruben Baez, that my school had 97% connectivity. 97%? I thought we were like 40 or 50%, but 97% blew my mind. A few days later, our fearless leader, Mr. Baez, calls me again and says, Maria Chan will be calling you to assist her with a slide for Superintendent Mr. Huerta. The superintendent? How awesome! Our school, with the name of the virus, is now on the map, and the word Corona now has a positive. And we, Corona Avenue Elementary, made that happen. It was like an out-of-body experience where I was talking about connectivity and how the programs are added to the platform. Then the call of all calls came on Thursday, May 14th, 2020. Mr. Baez said Superintendent Buettner wants to interview me and other principals for his Monday address. And really quick, shout out to Joanne Carrillo and Maria Parker, who are also part of it. I received a Zoom invite at 9:30 a.m. for a 10:30 a.m. Zoom with Superintendent Buettner. I was interviewed for our school's great accomplishment on our 97% connectivity. On March 13th, 2020, I had no idea what distance learning was or how it worked. No words and phrases were coming out of my mouth that I didn't know that I knew. I was so shocked at my knowledge in regards to monitoring connectivity. Watch out, Silicon Valley, here I come. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Round of applause for Rachel. That was wonderful. Rachel, I love the sense of humor, starting off talking about the fact that the school has the name Corona in it. That couldn't have been easy. And then the pop culture references, MacGyver and Rocky, just wonderful. But more importantly, the story has everything it should have. We know who it's about. It's you. We know what you're up against. You're making sure that the students have connectivity and the parents are involved and that everyone's pulling together to create this virtual campus. We know about all the barriers you overcame, and even threw in the extra one about the computers having no cameras. That sort of came in a little late in the game. But you figured out a way around it, and you got to the happy ending of 97% connectivity. And indeed, Silicon Valley, look out, here comes Rachel. So again, I mean, I'm not an easy grader, but I got to give this one an A+ too. Celia, any additional comments from you?
Actually, I think we should move to I agree with everything you said, Andy, but let's move to the chat box because so many people have comments.
Go ahead.
Lots of way to go, Principal Rachel. Michael Olivo says, love the setup of Corona Elementary School, the struggle with the laptop with no camera, then using the iPad as a supplement. The Schoology boot camp was a great element as well, and loved Watch Out Silicon Valley.
I want to pick up a question that Cora Watkins asked. She said, my question is not about the stories, but about the purpose of the stories beyond inspirational. What would one use either or both stories to accomplish? And what I would say is that, as we go down the line and people continue to run into challenges, whenever you're in a situation where you're thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to handle this? Well, let me tell you the story of Rachel Saldana. Let me tell you the story of Marissa Martinez faced with these unbelievable challenges and what they did. I mean, to me, these are classic stories of, I don't care what you throw at me, we're going to get it done. And I think those are great stories to have in your back pocket anytime life throws something at you where you think, how do I ever get this done? So to me, they're inspirational now and will be inspirational in the future because there's certainly going to be more challenges to come. And with that, we're going to have to move on because we have 4 more storytellers. Francis, who's next?
Yes. I also want to add to what's the purpose of storytelling. If we look at ethnic studies, and the purpose of ethnic studies is to tell a story, and because we serve a community of students who have historically been marginalized. When we talk about the successes and the victories of our students and our leaders, we're elevating our community and our students. So we're not just telling a story, we're also telling the story of success and how we beat all odds in our local district, in our schools. And also, that's a way that you're telling a parent, a community member, I'm a leader that's gonna overcome all obstacles for your child to get a good education in my school. So many reasons to tell a story. So the next presenter we have, Principal Mauro Bautista from Mendez High School. Welcome.
Good morning to everyone on the call. Francis, thank you for the invitation. I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Yo no soy lucido, mucho menos presumido, pero sí me doy a respetar. A los sentidos olvidan como lo detesto, porque no más hablo por hablar. Vacas de billetes produciendo diariamente, pues mi mente ha sido duplicar. Odio las mentiras, pero adoro a mi familia, y por ellos yo voy a luchar.
There is a section in our mission statement that asserts, Mendez students will persevere. No other class has exemplified that statement as much as the class of 2020. This class, as ninth graders, persevered through a contentious presidential election that negatively impacted many of our families. As 11th graders, this class persevered through the first teacher strike in LAUSD in over 30 years. As seniors, this class perseveres through a pandemic not seen in our lifetimes. Further, this class persevered through two heartbreaking Dodgers World Series defeats, although now we know that the other team that won the 2017 championship cheated. While already having lived up to our mission statement many times over, when the closure hit, we were concerned that some of our more vulnerable seniors, who have demonstrated immense improvements during their 11th and 12th grade years, would find it difficult to stay connected. Like many other schools, once the closure hit, we developed a system of communication with disconnected students, which included school-aging messages, emails, texts, and phone calls home. We documented these attempts in a Google Sheet to see who was responding and who was not. What set Mendez apart was the decision to do home visits as early as a week into the closure. We visited the homes of students who were not responding to our attempts to communicate with them. The home visits allowed us to better understand our seniors' home situation, and we quickly realized that, in addition to a computer and hotspot, many of our most vulnerable seniors were also in need of basic supplies, such as water, toilet paper, and milk. Therefore, we returned to these homes to drop off these basic items needed to function. We visited some homes as many as 3 or 4 times to check in on the families and to keep encouraging our seniors. We are proud to share that our home visits paid off. The great majority of our vulnerable seniors successfully made it to graduation. A few others have only summer classes to go. The Mendez class of 2020 is historic for many reasons. The key among them, the class is historic for its extraordinary resilience.
Thank you, Mauro. Are you ready for some feedback?
Yes.
Well, first there's best scarf ever from that opening picture of you. And I like in the video how eventually the the structure of the story emerged. For a while, there was a lot of context there at the beginning where I was wondering, what is it going to be about? But then when you established all the seniors and trying to make contact with the families and the homes to make sure that they had the resources they need, then I really got what the story was about, and the extra effort that you made to make sure they had the supplies necessary to be connected and to be engaged in their learning. And then the happy ending of the graduation and the beautiful Zoom tribute that you and all the teachers, I assume, participated in to acknowledge your seniors and send them off, identifying some individuals in that class. So again, all the elements are there, and I thought the video was very well constructed. Celia, additional comments from you before we look at the Q&A box?
I would just say I thought it was a beautiful story, and I think you did a great job with the visuals. I think if we could just have one protagonist, it would make us feel a little bit more connected to the story, whether that protagonist is you or one of the seniors that you want to feature. I think that would help us kind of really zero in and feel like we're just watching one person that's just like us and get connected to the story right away. Some of the comments in the chat box, lots of positive comments in the chat box. Beautiful way to make this about serving the community as a whole. Thank you. Love the introduction. That song resonates with my life in every sense of the word. Amazing story. Love the photographic storytelling element. Very compelling story. One person made the comment they'd like to see this story told from the perspective of a student. And then last comment I'll share is, thanks for sharing, Mr. Bautista, a true leader within the community.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Francis, that's the first set of 3. Are we just moving on to the next set of 3, or are we taking a break between? What's the plan?
Yeah, I think that because these stories are fresh, I think we should go to the discussion board that I shared momentarily, okay. And I will share again.
Okay.
Let's see. So that because these stories are fresh, I invite you to respond to any one of the 3 that you just heard, and then talk about these items. What was the challenge that you noticed? What was it about? And then all the way through. So we'll take a few moments just to take one story that you just saw, one of the 3, and enter your comments here, and feel free to add and comment to each other's stories. So we'll give about 5 minutes.
Is it okay if we go beyond 11 o'clock? Because we probably will need extra time.
Yes.
Okay.
We have 1 minute and 50 seconds. Okay, I'm noticing that you are entering your comments, your thoughts are here. This is another way that we're ensuring that we're connected even though we can't see you. We see you entering your discussion, questions, and responding. So we know you're present through this discussion board. And so I think that takes us now to our next presenter. So at this point, I want to introduce Maritza Maldonado, principal of Latona Elementary School. Welcome, Maritza.
So thank you guys. I share this picture with you because I'm deathly afraid of heights. But sometimes you have to do things that you're afraid of, that are out of your comfort zone. And more times than not, the results are worth the perceived risk. A little bit about me. I'm the daughter of immigrant parents. I'm the middle of 5, and I grew up in the Pico Union area. I started my educational journey at 10th Street Elementary School, but I only went there for kindergarten. An opportunity was presented to my mom about going to a better school, a school that had better resources. And so I was bused to the valley, Encino to be exact. I was what you call a PWT student, permit with transportation, which is a program to integrate inner city kids from poor neighborhoods into valley schools. My first day at Lanai Road stands out because once we arrived, we were all sent to the auditorium. Teachers came out, and one by one, they started calling out kids to line up and follow them. As luck would have it, my name was never called, and all I remember was crying. Crying because I didn't understand what was going on. Crying because I was scared. I was finally placed in a class, and when I got there, I asked the teacher if I could use the restroom, which was one of the few sentences I knew how to say in English. She responded with, "Is it an emergency?" I had no idea what emergency meant, so I just shook my head and said no. I wasn't allowed to go to the restroom. I believe this incident played a huge role in my passion to advocate for students. Fast forward to March 13th, 2020, a day most of us will never forget. On the inside, my mind was running 100 miles per hour. On the outside, I was pretty calm and collected. That day, we dismissed students without a hitch. All of them had resource packets, and all 2nd through 6th graders were issued a Chromebook. By the following week, all K through 6th grade students had technology. Naively, I thought that was it. My job is done, and now my students are set. That, of course, was far from the truth. I never thought that the biggest challenge I would encounter was resistance to Zoom. And there were different reasons for this. Some teachers were afraid to use it, some didn't know how to use it, some didn't have the technological skills, and others had trust issues. I felt that sense of urgency, but I knew they had UTLA behind them. I started thinking of 6-year-old me, and I knew that not connecting was not an option. So I did what I know how to do. I used this as an opportunity to model and lead by example. I started having to do Zoom meetings by grade level with all of my students. I would read to them, and we would discuss plot, characters, author's point of view, etc. I used this as an opportunity to connect with students and to connect with the parents. And I started sharing my experiences with my staff, the joy of connecting with the students and that joy that it was bringing me to be able to see them. I engaged my teachers by inviting them to join me. And I also asked them to send out the weekly Zoom invites. And within a couple of weeks, 100% of them were using Zoom. Not only did I have all of them come on board with Zoom, but I also had 100% of them participate and complete the Mastery Reading and Learning training, and 85% of them participate in the Future Ready certification. My teachers are incredible teachers, but they were scared and not used to having to adapt to this change as quickly as we were asking them to. Because I knew them, because because I know how they are. I knew I had to be patient and give them time to process this change. I was recently asked how I was able to accomplish this, and it's because I always bring it back to their why. It's actually a bulletin board in a hallway. I lead with firmness, but compassion. I understand that we're all at different levels and that it takes some people a little bit longer than others to implement things. But I never let up, and I always remind them of their why. We do this for our students to give them an opportunity to succeed, because they are the future world changers. And if we're going to do right by our students, we can't forget our why. For me, it's because I was that student. I was the EL student, the poor student, the student who was bused 1 hour each way to go to a better school with better resources. Because at my core, I know that my job is to advocate for those who need a voice. And lastly, because I believe, no, I know we have the power to change life trajectory of all students. I leave you with this. Always remember your why. Don't let them forget their why. And don't be afraid to lead with compassion. Thank you.
Thank you, Maritza. I have to confess, I had a little trouble hearing you. The audio, I don't know if it was me or if it was at your end, it was a little hard to hear. But what I did hear, it answered all the questions that a story needs to answer. Who's it about? It's about you. What do you want? It really starts with March 13th and all the challenges therein. Getting people to understand Zoom, connect, to trust, and how you overcame those barriers, leading by example, connecting with students and parents, the results, 100% on Zoom and all those other good numbers. And then sort of the meaning of the story is that it brought you back to your why you do this. The opening story, I love the way that you opened by being, vulnerable and talking about, being afraid of heights and telling the story about the restroom incident. One thing I want to highlight here, and I think Celia may speak to this too, in storytelling, vulnerability is your superpower. When you open up and show that you're vulnerable, it gives the audience a chance to root for you, to feel for you, to want to be on your side. If we tell a story where we're perfect and we solve every problem and nothing phases us, we can't identify with that because no one's perfect. We all have our flaws. So if they're perfect every time, it's like, well, good for you. That's not my world. But when you start with your vulnerabilities and talk about stuff that makes you very human, makes our heart go out to you, you pull us in. And that was a very nice touch at the beginning. Celia, additional comments from you before we look at the Q&A box?
I totally agree. And I was actually going to say something about vulnerability. And I loved, Maritza, how you pulled in first your own fears and how you slowly overcame them in your childhood, and then talking about the teacher's fears of Zoom. And really you walked us step by step exactly how you overcame that barrier. And that was, I think that's an area that you could have easily glossed over and said, I worked with the teachers to overcome it, but instead you really pulled us into exactly what you did so that we could see how this problem was solved and it wasn't glossed over at all. A couple of comments from the chat box, lots of nice comments. One is great way to end it. Great connection to the why in education. Connecting to your background is a great way to bring people in. And then last one, talking about the story from your childhood. Is it an emergency? A tough question if emergency is not in your vocabulary. She went from her strength to modeling that for teachers. Nice work.
Thank you. Thank you for passing those along, Celia. We have two more storytellers. Francis, let's introduce the next storyteller, please.
Next one is Angie Cantu from San Antonio Elementary School.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Okay, please let me know if you could see my, yes, okay. Good morning, everyone. So my story, and I'm at San Antonio Elementary, and lots of stories to share, but I put these up there because I'm doing this, that every picture that we place has a story behind them. So these are the many stories of this year. However, I'm going to introduce you to the Rodriguez family. Mother, Jessica, 14-year-old Irma, 12-year-old Jose, 9-year-old Yolanda, and our 6-year-old Isamar, and our 4.5-year-old Josefina. So this family, mother has been on her own for the past 3.5 years. Father was deported shortly after the youngest one was born, and mother has had to be the sole provider for her family. She has struggled to find a stable home, have a stable job, so she has resorted to a lot of the street vendors that a lot of the people in our community resort to. And her struggles, last year in March 2019, she made that move. She came to tell me that she could no longer afford to live where she was living at in Huntington Park. So she had made a choice to move to Bakersfield, 113 miles away from home, taking her 5 children. So she would move to Bakersfield, where, when you'll see she returns, she shared that she worked shortly on the fields. She went back to street vending amongst a few other jobs that she experienced. Her children were enrolled in school, and she shared how her children cried daily. They did not want to be at the schools. One of her daughters, the 3rd grader, had an IEP. Unfortunately, it was not implemented through the time they were there, and the kids begged her to come back to what they call home. So August 2019, this academic year, they returned back. She's not in our area. She comes and she's crying, saying that her kids want to come back to school, to our school. I granted the permit, and they were back. They were back the 4th day of school, August 23rd of 2019. Fast forward to March. I've had him for the whole year. By this time, the 3rd grader has had 104 absences since preschool. So we know of this family because they have been on our radar. We start intervention. Intervention starts the last week of February. On March 2nd, the youngest one is not picked up. She's in our office till 4:30. 14-year-old comes to pick her up. We cannot release her. We find out that mother has been home cooking because it is March 2nd and she has to have money for the rent. At this point, we realize that the 14-year-old is not in school. Our counselors, myself, and everyone else works to get her enrolled at the high school. And we do. We were successful in getting her enrolled. That was March 5th. March 13th, the week after. And we all know what happened then. At that point, I had no time or even think that I had to check in with my girls at that point. So the week after, my whole team, we mobilized and we tried to reach them. The first week, the second week, no avail. We made several attempts, nothing. After spring break, we took a more aggressive approach to reach out to the family. Finally, I was able to locate an uncle who shared that they had moved to Fresno, but nobody had heard from them. I was informed that they had no place to live and that they were staying with a relative. Nope, no one has seen them. Responses to different calls from the people on the contact list. On April 21st, we were finally able to connect with mother. My counselor was. And she cried and she said that she was so sorry she could not get a hold of us. She did not have a phone and could not get a hold of us. We finally got a message through. She shared that she would come back to get a laptop because she needed one for her youngest. And that she did. We started realizing after many contacts, we had looked at our logs that we had created and everyone reaching out to them. I get an email on April 24th from our operations coordinator. It says that we have a family that has reached out and requested laptops. And I was up, not that I didn't want to see these reports, but this report really brought so much joy because his mother had finally provided a right phone number for us to reach her at. And that's how we got that particular phone number. It was not till May 20th that mother came to pick up the laptop that she had requested. She made it back on May 20th to pick up the technology and enrollment packet. At this point, I realized that this mother came back just because she owed it to us. We had talked to her and she made it known that she was very apologetic for what had happened. Making that trip back, I never asked how she did it. She was still staying in Bakersfield. This time, her 113-mile trip back to our school allowed me to see her strength, her resiliency, her determination, and for me to reflect on the unfortunate plight for many of my families My team, including myself, were quick to replace judgment and frustration of how this family was not connecting. Through this story, I can tell you that all of us, and including this family, was suffering loss. There was a loss for so many things. The loss of life that we all encounter as we've watched the news. The data that kept on saying how many hospitalizations and death. The family had lost their home, their place of living. There was no jobs. My teachers were struggling, no students, no connections, lots of the things that forced me to look beyond what I was seeing in front of them. So as you can see, all these things through this pandemic or school closures, we all have suffered many great losses. Mostly the presence of our students. So my goal this whole time was to connect with my students. And that connection meant social media, telephone calls, email, phone calls. But however, through this story, I've come to understand that those connections transcend these physical means of communication. It was through this story that I know that those connections must go beyond that. So as we continue with this particular form of teaching and learning, I ask all of us to keep in mind the that we face daily, whether it's from our teachers, from our students, from our colleagues, whoever it is, that there is a story to tell behind these little squares. There's something greater than that connection that we all have set as a goal for ourselves. So through this loss has come a great gain of respect for the families that I serve on a daily basis. So I am very grateful to these two particular gals that have taught me a lot during these great losses that we suffered this year.
Thank you, Angie. And I can hear the emotion in your voice as you tell that story. And I think everybody is moved by that. And those pictures of those two little girls at the end is so powerful. There's a lot of good stuff in this story, Angie. Mike, and what I like about it is that there is a good story here with real people and emotion and all the things that we need. My concern is with the level of detail and the length. Sometimes a really good story can be held back by too many details, too much to follow. I think as everyone was listening to it along with me, and we started in August of 2019 and it went all the way until this May of June of 2020. There are a lot of people, a lot of places, a lot of facts to keep track of. And when you're telling a story and it's just you and your voice and us listening, it's harder for the audience to keep track of all of that. If this was something, a story that we were to read, in a brochure where we could see pictures and go back and say, who is she again? And where was that? Then there's less of a burden on you as a storyteller to really strip it down to its basics and make it easier to understand. The thing about first drafts is, what I say to people is, put it all in there. Let's get everything in the first draft. But then as you continue to refine the story, you have to ask yourself, what am I trying to say here? What are the most essential elements? And what could I maybe leave out of the next draft so that I'm not asking the audience to keep track of so many people, so many places, so many dates, and so many details, because it becomes hard. But there is a good story here. Celia, anything you want to add to that? And then we're going to move on because we're already in overtime.
No, I mean, I completely agree. And I thought it was a beautiful, emotional story, very well told. And thank you for sharing it. I just do want to read a couple of comments from folks, since so many people thanked you for sharing. Thanks, Angie, for being the voice of the lessons many of us have learned from this crisis. Suspended judgment and give grace. You are amazing and make us proud. Maybe we'll just leave it at that, but lots of beautiful comments.
Very good. Frances, we have one more storyteller. Let's get to that as soon as we can.
And I thank all of our principals for their courage. They knew ahead of time that they were going to share their stories and get a little bit of feedback. Please know we appreciate everything that you're sharing. We're all growing from the feedback that you're all receiving as well and being inspired by your stories. Our final principal presenter is Leo Gonzalez from Southgate High School.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. So I'm pretty sure that you can see my screen, right? So I think we're good. Okay, so the difficult part of this when I was asked to present was the I. So in talking to Andy, the I is the most difficult thing to do as instructional leaders, because there's always a we, and behind every good leader is a team. So I just want to make sure that everybody who presented this today, you guys are amazing. So this is what I came up with. So right off the bat, I know I needed to assist my school in authentic learning. It was important to continue to lead rigorous-based lesson planning by supporting my administrative team and teachers. I believe my Community of Schools Administrator, Mr. Jesus Nunez, did an amazing job with leading PD for principals. So that model right there with Mr. Hernandez as well was very inspirational for us. And it had me understand that I needed to establish at Southgate High School these guiding principles for distance learning. And I knew there was a serious challenge up ahead. When I was looking at a lot of the feedback from teachers, it was about what did distance learning look like? And a lot of it had to do with the questions on the 4 R's. Many of you are familiar with rigor, relationships, relevance, and results. And how do we do that through distance learning? So I had to make sure we had to model something. We had to do something very, very, cutting edge, because this was very different in showing our students how to learn. So my administrative team and myself discussed what it would look like in the next few weeks. The uncharted waters, like we say, are difficult for principals as well, as we're trying to learn it, and saying, well, here's a PD on Monday, and the hopes is that implementation is done sooner than later. But we also understood, looking at some of the presentations, the Zooms and the students having to have connectivity or devices or anything that needed to be done before we even included Nearpod into this. So I created a little timeline for our school and for our teachers, and for the pilot team to look at how we're going to be able to share this. The challenge for us was, first of all, like I said, getting the devices, right? You can't do anything with any Nearpod or any platform if you don't have devices. And how does the observational visits and giving teachers feedback, what does it look like? So how does it look like with distance learning? So we were able to transform with our pilot team here what standards, objective, agenda, and reflections, things that we're already doing at the school. Students need routines, and so do teachers. So I think that was the most important piece of it too. When March 15th came around, we were like, well, what's gonna happen in the next 2 weeks? And the district was coming up with their own guidelines. But it was a challenge for us. It was a challenge for me to say, hey, this is the continuity, it's nothing different, but our students should be able to learn. But the hardest piece was the relationship piece, because students weren't checking in. If you only have less than 10 students on the Zoom, that was very, very difficult as well. But we did it. We were working very hard on providing Nearpod with, the different pieces for assessments, for feedback. So we were able to put the glows and the grows for our teachers as they created many of these lessons. These were all pilot lessons, right? So they were all trying different things and showcasing what they needed to do with their colleagues. And these were very, very, 4-hour meetings where they were listening to presentations from different departments, providing feedback, and also modifying their own. So that was very important, because that's a reflection piece that all teachers need is, am I doing this correctly? Or how can I lead this work with my other colleagues? So that was very, very beneficial, because these are the pioneers and trailblazers establishing these objectives to be strong, engaging, and mentored the other teachers through Nearpod as well. A lot of the things that we did also was reflection. So I myself had to model how to use different tools and also showing our teachers what Nearpod might be and what it is not. I think the importance of it was coming through as we were able to see what can happen in the end, because we don't know. We don't have a finish line. So looking at the approaches that we have with what Nearpod is, I'll share a little clip here.
I don't think it's playing, or if you are playing, I don't think we can see it yet.
Okay, well, it should be going on, it should be playing there, so I'm not sure. So it was just showing the Nearpod pieces where our teachers, conveyed the idea of, lesson planning and what they can find on the platform. So our teachers came up with lessons, and also they came up with tutorials. So the beautiful thing is that this evolved into something different. So as we went through the whole phase of Nearpod and implementation, it became something where what are we starting and how are we finishing? We don't know what the fall entails. So that is the biggest challenge for us. But I was glad to see that at the end of this semester, we look more prepared. I feel we're more prepared. We have teachers that are Nearpod certified that can actually lead the work. They did it on Pupil Free Day. They spent an hour, even with the UTLA contract, all the challenges that they have, but they were solid. They got that feedback. You can see that some of the teachers really, really utilized what the scoreboard was, what Nearpod's features there are. And what does it mean for us? I believe it means that we are ready for the fall as best we can. And using this platform, I just want to make sure that, we also have to handle and manage all the things that have happened during distance learning. But, at the end, like I said, it is important for us to prepare our teachers and to model the work, just like it was modeled in our community of schools. So I'm really appreciative of Mr. Nunez and his team that actually modeled this throughout the semester. But thank you very much. I appreciate my opportunity to share.
Thank you, Leo. And I want to address something you said at the very beginning. You talked about sort of the eye problem, and we're not talking about what optometrists deal with. Mm-hmm. It's the concern of telling a story where I am the hero and it feels self-aggrandizing, and when it is always the work of a team. Rarely is one person doing it all. And what I want to say to that is that if any of you resonate with that and think, I feel the same way, I don't want to tell a story about me and be self-aggrandizing. It is okay to start with you as the person people identify with, because rather than think of you as the hero of the story, think of yourself as the guide. As in, if you take my hand and follow me through what I've seen, you will see what I saw, and you will see all the things, all the good things that happen, all the people I work with, and you can hand the baton of being the leader of the story to someone else and saying, I worked with this person and I'll tell you about them, and they can hand it to someone else. So if the story is ultimately about the work of a team, that's fine. But people do not identify with teams. People identify with individuals. So let's meet Leo. Let's get to know him and like him and enter his world. And then Leo can hand the ball off to someone else and say, I also want you to meet this person and that person, because we all did this together. And we can meet them one by one and follow our way through the story. And that way, you've taken us into the story, but you haven't necessarily cast yourself as the hero. So I want everyone to hear that, because sometimes you are the right person to start the story, so don't be reluctant to put yourself in that role. Celia, anything you want to add? Because we're in overtime. Just one comment from you, and then we're going to go back to Francis.
The only comment I want to make is that while I liked your visuals, I thought that that it would be a good practice to tell the story and not rely on any visuals at all, because I think that would force you to have to explain a little bit more about what Nearpod is and exactly how it worked. And then in the case where your visual isn't working, the story doesn't suffer at all. So I thought that there were a few details that I wanted from you that I think your visuals were supposed to explain, but I think if you would have just given us some of those details verbally, it would have been more helpful.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Celia. Francis, before I hand it back to you, if I could just share my screen for a second for some free resources that I'd like to make available to everybody. We do a monthly newsletter called Free Range Thinking, which is only about best practices in communications for people like you. If you want to sign up for it, if you go to our website, thegoodmancenter.com, give us your email address, we'll send this to you once a month, and you can stay up to speed on what's going on there in communications, and we will do nothing else with your email address, I promise. And those two books Francis mentioned earlier, Why Bad Ads Happen to Good Causes, and more importantly, Why Bad Presentations Happen to Good Causes, are available for free. These were underwritten by Foundation, so if either title interests you, you can go to our website, go to the resources section, you can download either book for free. And in between writing books and newsletters, if I see something really timely for communications, I will tweet you a link to a book, a website, a documentary, an article. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Goodman Center. One last thought before we sign off and hand you back to Francis. If you take away nothing else from today's lesson on storytelling, I hope you'll remember this. In the long run, numbers are important. The data is important, but numbers by themselves tend to numb. Look, it's right there in the word. And all that jargon we use, it just jars. And nobody ever marched on Washington because of a pie chart, I'm pretty sure. Stories are different. Stories, by their very nature, get stored in people's minds. So, if you can change the story inside someone's head, you've taken the first step to changing the world. And if you will do that, then for today, for right now, I'm comfortable saying that for this story, we can close the curtain, but it's definitely not the end. Thank you, Francis. Thank you, everyone at LAUSD. Thank you for your time and attention. It was great working with you. Francis, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you, Andy, and I appreciate your team and all the resources you brought to us. You've just made us stronger after bringing us all together. In preparation for this session, when we're looking at everyone's presentation, we realized that we were actually going through a chronology from March to the present. So when we all came together a week ago to plan this, the principals acknowledged that their stories was actually from beginning, from Maritza deploying devices to Leo saying, fall, here we come. So it was a nice little story and chronology that we all put together. So I'm glad that all these minds came together for this. So appreciate you, Andy, and we hope we can stay in touch. And thank you. And as we transition, I'm going to invite you just to take a few moments to enter in your discussion, the last 3 presentations that we saw, and see what elements of storytelling you found. And after we do that, we will be acknowledging some very special leaders who are moving on to a different chapter in their lives. So go ahead and do that for a few moments. Take about 4 minutes and 45 seconds, and then we will come back and hand it over to our community of school administrators. Okay, as you're typing your message, we have about 2 more minutes left. Take a look at your Schoology group, refresh your page and see what your colleagues are indicating. Again, this is in the Schoology group under discussions, it's principal's presentation. Now this is part 2. I see that Milady is entering, Ernestine is entering, Cristina Munoz, Adriana Trejo, Dr. Rivera, Ms. Trejo. I see a few principals here who are entering their discussion and responding and connecting to the stories that we heard. So thank you for doing that. Gretchen Young, thank you. Gabriel Duran, thank you for pulling out what we saw in the stories and indicating those important elements that are going to help us when we are telling a story about the leadership, that everything that you're doing during this distance learning. We're going to learn so much from that. So with that said, I'm going to now introduce one of our community of school administrators who is going to share with us some news and acknowledge the leadership of one of our school principals. So Ruben Valles, welcome to our principals meeting.
Oh, thank you, Francis. Hello, fabulous local district East leaders. So I have the distinct pleasure of introducing one of our outstanding LAUSD, but also LD East principals, Bruce Clark, who is moving on to greener pastures, and he's retiring. For me, this is kind of bittersweet because I've known Bruce for a long time. He's been in the district over 34 years, as long as I've been alive, and he's been also a principal for 19 years. So or 14 years, probably 14 years. I remember 14 years ago when we were principals together in the Wild West, and I've always thought as Bruce as a superhero principal. And I say that not in jest, but I say that because he does everything and he goes above and beyond. Even to the point where he's in lunch recess when I would observe the campus and I became his supervisor, he would be giving kids educational trivia questions just to keep them in line, and they all responded well to that. And we all know that we have superheroes, correct? The alter ego of Batman, the superhero, is who? Bruce Wayne, all right? And the alter ego of Superman is Clark Kent. You put those alter egos together and we have Bruce Clark. So let's get a round of applause for Bruce Clark, our superhero principal who's going to retire. Bruce, go ahead.
Thank you. I feel like instead of like a superhero, a bit of like a big chicken, right? I'm the one who's retiring in the front of the corona, but I had announced it. I had thought about retiring last year and then announced to my faculty, we're going to give it one more shot, one more year. And I announced it at the beginning of the year, long before corona, but I know that I'm still a chicken instead of a superhero. But I'd like to thank Local District East, starting with Mr. Huerta. Thank you for setting the tone, for making this not just a local district, but a community. And I've been in a lot of communities, 21 years. This is my 21st year as a principal. I've bumped around a lot of communities, but and I found very few that really treasure and build communities. So I thank you for that. I'd like to especially thank Ruben for building a community here in Bell Cudahy Maywood, and it's yes, pressuring us to do our best individually and collectively, but also being there to support us with encouragement, with your good nature, and most of all with your service leadership. And thank you for that. And thank you especially to my colleagues. We've been able to become a band of brothers and sisters through all of this over the years, and something very unique that I didn't experience for my first 2 decades as a principal. Thank you for banding together. We're like a bunch of high school students texting each other during meetings. Sorry about that, Francis. Encouraging each other, helping each other do better. But that's how much we care about each other and how much this community's been able to do that. So I won't bore you. I know we're moving up on lunchtime, but wanted to share one anecdote if I can, and that is I had a metanoia experience, a conversion experience, if you will, as an educator and maybe as a human being, a road to Damascus moment. Only it didn't happen on the road to Damascus. It happened on the road to the credit union. About 30 years ago, I was a 2nd grade teacher at Park Avenue Elementary School, 2 doors down from where Ruben is, in the same classroom where I think Cecilia Quinones and others are occupying. They still have that chalkboard in that classroom. And if they look carefully, they'll probably see some scratch marks on that chalkboard, probably from me and my fingernails, because I was a very anxious type A teacher. Go figure, I'm still an anxious type A principal, but and trying to very much make the most of my career. I finally, trying to bond with my own kids, got in the car one day to go to the credit union. You remember credit unions? Like, and those of you who remember that you actually had to go to the credit union, or if you really remember that there was only one credit union to go to on Rosnell Terrace, then it's time for you to retire too. But for the rest of you, there used to be a credit union you had to drive down to. And I took both kids in that hot car and got there, pulled into the parking lot, opened up the trunk to get out the stroller. And I noticed there's a lady watching me do this in the car next door on the right. And I said, oh, well, big deal. So I go over and get my daughter out, put her in the stroller, and I noticed this lady's still looking at me. And I'm thinking, oh, must be a retired teacher. She likes to look at people and she has lots of time on her hands. And so, no matter, went around and got my son, drug him around the side of the car, plopped him in the back of the stroller. And then, of course, I look up, and about 2 feet away from me is that piercing eyes of that lady again. But this time she rolls down her window and locks eyes on me and kind of smiles and says, treasure these moments, savor these moments, because they go by so quickly. And I've thought about that conversation off and on over the years and drawn back to it, not just when I try to refocus on my own kids and try to spend quality time with them and treasure the intimate moments I've had with them, but maybe more importantly, I've tried to treasure the moments that I have with these kids here, now at Nueva Vista, but across classrooms and in time and space across this district. And I'd like to leave you with some thoughts that if you ever, like me, find yourself being really anxious and sometimes even disappointed over your data, or maybe you got a call or a text message that you didn't want from the operations administrator, go back to the opening gate where the kids come in, if you're lucky enough to ever do that again, or crash a Zoom session if your teachers are nice enough to let you, and then take that moment and lock eyes with some kids. Lock eyes with them and welcome them to your community, to the present moment. And those kids will, in their love, in their compassion for you, and most of all in their perseverance, they'll remind you and give you strength to keep going, as they have me. And so treasure those moments, treasure them and savor them, because I'm a witness, they go by so very quickly.
Thank you and congratulations, Bruce. We're gonna miss you. At this point, I would like to now introduce the East LA Community of Schools. I believe we have Lisa Davis who wants to share also some transitions and retirement. So if you could please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Nata Costa, the director. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lisa Davis, the director in the Community of Schools for East Los Angeles. And it's my pleasure to introduce our principal here at Perez Special Ed Center, Mr. Michael Terry, who will also be retiring this year. But before we bring him in, I'd like to share a little bit about what this inspirational leader meant to all of us here. And the best way I can describe Mike is to tell you about 2 encounters we had. The first one was when we first walked through our offices here at Perez, and I was greeted with such a warm welcome and smile from Mike. Mike, you have never stopped being, look at his smile, see, look at his smile. You have never stopped being hospitable and generous. And that generosity and sincere compassion for your students, we here at East Los Angeles have all had the privilege of witnessing each and every day, being your neighbors and your roommates. But the best memory, Mike, that describes your type of leadership for all of us was when I toured your campus for the first time. And I just saw an absolute wonderland of career and vocational classes where students were thriving and learning those real life experiences and jobs training and skills to help them lead independent and productive lives. And the best part of that tour was when I went to the coffee shop, which looks better than a Starbucks, by the way, you have to come and see it. I went through the coffee shop and saw 3 of my former students, Brian, Jairo, and Daniel, all thriving ear to ear, beaming smiles when they saw me, and they were so ecstatic to share all the things they were learning at your school, Mike. It was a moment for me. They talked about everything that they were doing there. And I think, Mike, that is the biggest legacy that you are leaving, is the way that the students at Perez Learning Center thrive. They really do. And all of us were in awe of your work here because we got to see it each and every day. They just blossom here, Mike, and that's an attribute to you, and that's the legacy that you leave. That truly is the legacy that you leave. And you should be extremely proud of what these kiddos can do. Your career has spanned over 30 years, 10 of which you have spent here in this wonderful, wonderful center. And from the bottom of all of our hearts, Mike, here in our Cost East LA family, what we wish you in your retirement is that you have the opportunity to fill your days with every single thing you enjoy, because you deserve it. So a big congratulations and virtual hug for you, Mike.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. You know, in fact, right now I'm here at the school and we're tidying up some last minute IEPs and handing out some grad items, and mostly excited about 32 new enrollments for August. So that's really exciting for our team here. It's interesting. Well, of course, kind of looking at my transition, interesting to note the passage of time. Like, for example, my first principalship back in 2003, the principal before me had been there for a while and he was retiring. And what was amazing to me was that he didn't have a computer in his office at that time. And the SAA, of course, was his hero. And it seemed as though she did everything. But I was so proud myself of the work that I did at that school to bring technology not only to the principal's office, of course, but to every one of the 34 classrooms on that campus back then. That was at Salvin Special Ed Center when I was there. So it's absolutely amazing for me to fast forward to today. What a different world we live in now. Everything's completely virtual and compared to that time just 17 years ago. But anyway, I'm thrilled, I'm excited. And people often say that what feels like the end is often the beginning. I feel strong. I'm excited about the future. I'm excited about the opportunity to change for myself and change my work towards a different direction. I'm grateful for everything I've learned so far, and I'm looking forward to the journey ahead of me. Thank you so much, and to so many people. Mr. Huerta, thank you. Ms. Janet Montoya, Dr. Ortiz, of course. Thank you to everyone, and big hugs too to everybody. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Michael. We're going to miss you, and congratulations. Thank you for your service all these years.
Thank you. Thank you.
And the final piece of this meeting today are announcements and updates. We're going to begin with Sergio Franco, our Administrator of Operations, who is going to be sharing some updates.
Good morning, LD East administrators. It has been a tough and challenging year. Just want to thank each and every one of you for your flexibility, your resiliency, and your commitment to your entire school community. It is really appreciated. I can't say enough about each and every one of you. When Mr. Huerta alluded and said this morning, some of you really went out, distribute devices to all of our students. Principal Martinez, you are to be commended for your great work at a moment's notice to show the rest of us what LD East is really about. Thank you for being that role model for all of us. Really appreciate that. Now, talking about devices, we've distributed them. So now we have to do data collection on them. Your operations administrators have given you a link to a spreadsheet so that you can help ITD. But really, this is intended to help you to catch up with device tracking. This assignment was due Monday, June 15th. What we are asking you to do is to please notify your operations coordinators if you have completed the upload. The upload will be closed, or the link will be closed on Friday, so that ITD could do the bulk upload. So please notify us, Boyle Heights community, that notify me if you have, and notify your operations coordinator. In addition to that, this will help your for those schools that are being audited by OIG. This can serve as your evidence of the device distribution and how you kept track of those. So it'll be helpful when OIG comes back in August and requests this information. Next, I will be distributing the LAUSD employee scholarship checks to the selected high schools for the selected recipients. They delivered those checks to me yesterday, and I'm going to make sure that you get them in your hands so that you are able to give them to those recipients in your schools. On another note, I know that you are receiving reminders regarding the MSND, or the Natural Disaster Reporting Time. Just remember that the reporting time includes those categories: the quarantine and experience COVID-19 symptoms, individuals experiencing a need for childcare, those caring for children under 18 of age whose school children provider is closed or unavailable. I won't read them to you, but those are available in the guidelines and job aids that were provided to your time reporters. If there are any questions, you could certainly reach out to the time reporter, or you can reach out to your operations coordinator. The last one that I have for you, and is very important as we close the year, is the update for the MISIS interface and enrollment portal. There are job aids out there, but as a reminder, school staff will need to log into MISIS to search for the approval applications in order to import the student information from the portal and complete the pre-enrollment process in MISIS. Just remember that we are competing for students, and I know that you're looking at that portal so that we are bringing as many boys and girls and as many families as we can into our wonderful LDE schools. That said, if I don't get to see you or interact with you, have a great time off if you're getting time off, and we'll be ready to come back when school reopens. Thank you, Francis. I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Sergio. And next up is Janet Montoya, Special Education Administrator in Local District East. Welcome, Janet.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Actually, it's almost the afternoon, but good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody, for your leadership this year in ensuring that all students are receiving access and equity. And with this, unfortunately, with the pandemic, when it all started off, we were told that we were not going to have to hold IEP meetings. So then all of a sudden the state, they changed their mind and they said, well, school districts are going to need to do this. So we were actually given the charge. I'm using the word charge because I didn't want to call it a challenge. So we were given the charge to hold virtual IEP meetings. And so it was up to us in the local district to come up with the process, train everyone, work with our parents, and actually those of you in the schools have just been principals and assistant principals have just been amazing working with our parents, because some of our parents were having some challenges with the technology piece. And so we appreciate that so very much. And through all of this work, I was monitoring the data on actually a weekly basis. And through that, actually, we completed like 4,000, I'm going to say it this way, 4,200 IEPs. And if you compare that to the other local districts, I mean, they're like 1,000, some were like 2,800. So it was just amazing how you all embrace the work. And I know I'm going to bring tears to my eyes, but I appreciate that so much, because we want to make sure that kids with disabilities have the same access as everyone else. So I appreciate that very much. So as the school year opens, I assume we will continue with virtual IEPs, and and we will get better at this. And I have to say, many of the APISs were telling me they actually they like doing it this way. So maybe we will continue. We also were put to the challenge of extended school year. So yes, we are having an extended school year, and that starts on the 29th. And so it's going to be handled via distance learning. And today the teachers are being trained on the curriculum. So, I'm sure it'll be very successful, and we picked some fabulous principals to support that work. So with that, I hope that everyone has a very restful summer if you are not working. And I'm available if you need me. Please email me, and I'm in the office a couple times a week. So if you need any assistance or support from me, please let me know. Okay, thank you so much. Have a nice, have some great time off.
Thank you, Janet. Last but certainly not least, Elsa Tinoco Enciso, our PACE administrator.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for everything you've done for your servant leadership, your resilience, and your continued commitment to all students and families. On behalf of Local District East and our Small and Mighty PACE team, we honor everything you have done, and I want you to know, you might not get the direct calls from the parents that have told us with detail how much they appreciate everything you have done, the long hours, meeting them on campus, the late calls, the return emails. Please know that maybe they didn't get back to you, but know that we have heard detailed accounts of your leadership. And I want you to know from the bottom of the heart how much, from the bottom of our hearts, how much we honor the work that you do. Continue to see us as your support. Know that we will be by your side with all things parent engagement, SSC, ELAC, etc. And do know that we are also assisting with the summer school inquiries, and know that every call that comes our way, we do return the calls, and we are getting a lot of families that are excited about summer school and everything that you are unfolding through the summer and next school year. With that, I also want to share some fantastic news in case you haven't heard. So on the screen you see in the big yellow box, the census has been extended to October 31st. And I want you to be as excited as we are here at Local District East, because that could mean potentially $500 million per year for the families that go ahead and fill that out and help us. And remember, we're all Title I schools, so we really need that extra funding. So we ask that you take some time to explore the Census 2020 Toolkit that is available online if you visit achieve.lausd.net/we-are-one. And the campaign is entitled "We Are One, Make Los Angeles Unified Count." And you see some of the key points there. You'll be able to find a Blackboard Connect messages already made, the principal letter that's already made, and a slide deck that's already available in the toolkit for you to use should you have the opportunity to share this with your parents at any kind of event or coffee with the principal that you might be having in the near future. I also want to tell you that we're here to support that. Use me as a resource. If you need some more support or anything from me, go ahead and connect with me. I want you to know that I stand with you. We stand by your side, and you're not alone in this endeavor. Another key item, if you see the bolded sentence at the end, this could be brand news for many of you. 454 schools in LAUSD were designated by the state to receive 2,000 for school site engagement around the census. And now you're probably wondering, whose school was selected? So if you look in today's folder, you'll see a census folder there with this slide. The toolkit, I already downloaded it for you as well, but you can also explore the website because they have videos, and they actually have the presentation that Mr. Antonio Placencia led when he presented this to our community partners and CBOs. So I want to let you know that the list of the 454 schools is already available in our Schoology folder. I placed it both in the Schoology group for principals and assistant principals. So it's available at your fingertips, and you'll know there are many Local District East schools there. So in case you haven't had the word, and it just came out on Monday, so if you haven't heard, it's not because anyone was trying to hold out. It was just released to me yesterday, and I was so happy to get it on time to be able to promote it and let you know that it's there. Should you have any questions about the census or any kind of support, know again that I would like to support you in your endeavors. Know that the PACE team has been promoting it, but you know, our families have a lot of questions, and we have to always make sure that they feel safe and comfortable with this. And again, please know that we stand with you. We honor everything you do, and please take some time to refresh and relax if you're able to take some weeks off this summer. And we remember we're only a phone call, a text, or an email away. From the bottom of our hearts, we thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much, Elsa. And because in our audience, we acknowledge that the 320 participants consist of principals and our very valuable assistant principals who have been the right hand to all of us. Although you are not presenting here with your principals, know that you're there. We acknowledge you. We recognize how important you are. We value everything that you do. and you really help us as leaders make things happen for our students. So as we are learning more about our upcoming retirees, we will also acknowledge everybody in a special way. You know how challenging that is in this virtual space we're in, but we get more creative every day. So as we learn more about the names that are retiring, we are looking to acknowledge you in a very, very special way very soon. Thank you to all of our instructional support units, our mental health, our PSA, our budget team, our community of school teams, our content teams. There's numerous people. You'll see them in the flip grid. Please visit the flip grid because it'll remind you of the team that's standing by your side and who acknowledge the role that you play as principals and how we're here for you and to support you. So with that said, we've come to the end of our program, but I want to hand it off to Mr. Huerta for any concluding remarks before we sign off and go off to lunch.
Yes, thank you, Francis. Mike and Bruce, thank you so much for your leadership. You will be missed. We all know that you are great leaders and great people, and we were truly blessed by having you working with our students here and learning from you. So I wish you all the best in the world, and I know you're going to do great things. I love that you both said you're healthy and you're ready to move on to the next challenge. So we could all wish we were there with you, but we still have some time to go. And thanks a lot. Principals, thank you so much for your leadership. I want to thank those that have signed up for summer school. We are trying something new this year in Local District East. We are auto-enrolling every single kid from K through 8. I know it's a huge task, and I want to thank you for signing up. And we still need teachers to sign up. So if you still have some contact with some of your teachers, you know, if they want to do summer school still, the window is still open. It's only going to be 3 hours a day. And I think it's only going to be 4 days a week. And it's not going to be such a big task because everything's prepared for them to just teach. So thank you all for everything you do. I had to plug that in because we need about 1,000 more teachers, folks.
A little bit of a task, right? Just a little bit of a task.
For me, so hopefully get it from somewhere else. I just want to make sure that all of our students are enrolled in a summer school program instead of being out there not doing much. Okay, so thank you all and have a great, great vacation and summer. And I hope we all stay connected during the summer. Thank you.
So on the count of 3, we're going to put our hands at the front here like we're at our table. On the count of 3, we're going to say, go Local District D. So if you could please open up your mic and your camera, because you're the only people that are visible here to our over 300 participants. 1, 2, 3, go
Local District East.
Yay. Bye, everybody. Thank you.